Chapter 899. On the screen, the scene of two people chasing after one person was very shocking. The audience watched as Qin Mo's HP drop to a critical level, as though he would be killed in the next second. Qin Mo wouldn't be able to escape even if Lin Chintao tried to kill him under the city defense tower. But at that moment, Qin Mo released a skill, purifying Rao Rong's control. The long fingers on his right hand moved swiftly, releasing the second skill, forming a circular sword formation that nullified the damage. With a wave of his long sword, his body flashed and he headed towards the wilderness, leaving behind a silver afterimage. It was a show-off. Seeing this scene, the commentator could not help but shout, "Beautiful." Lin Chintao had already used his ultimate move when he was about to attack. There was no way he could catch up now. He could only watch as Qin Mo return to the city. Moreover, he had lost half of his HP at the bottom of the tower. No matter how unwilling they were, they could only retreat. However, a figure leapt out from the bushes and instantly appeared in front of him, unleashing the most explosive attack. Lin Chintao's hand, which was holding the mouse, took a step back, knocking the microphone beside him. For such a commotion. Everyone felt as if their throats were being choked. Not for anything else, but for the devilish smile on the silver-haired youngster's face as he moved the mouse. It was a murderous aura. That figure flew with the wind, his target was Lin Chintao. Lin Chintao gritted his teeth and used his skills, but he still couldn't escape the young man's hunting range. But Rao Rong was Rao Rong after all. The moment Qin Mo dodged, he seemed to have realized something. He charged into the wilderness and stood in front of Lin Chintao, using his ultimate skill to give Lin Chintao time to escape. Immediately afterward, he activated Swift Run and returned to the defense tower. This set of attacks was completed. Everyone could feel Rao Rong's ability as the best team controller. Seems like it won't work. The shoutcaster chuckled. Spade Z's pursuit isn't effective against Rao Rong. That's true. Another shoutcaster sighed. But this is a battle between masters. I really didn't expect Spade Z to come over from that place. If I wasn't watching from God's perspective, I would have thought that Qin Mo and Spade Z had discussed something beforehand. But now, it seems like the two of them are thinking the same thing. They're on the same side, and it's really scary when used properly. Lin Chintao couldn't hear what was going on outside. Every contestant had to ensure that they could compete in peace. Every contestant had to wear a soundproof earpiece. When he returned to the city, he could feel his palms sweating. Because Lin Chintao knew how shocking it had been. On the map, Spade Z's figure disappeared again. Qin Mo came out of the city center and headed straight for the jungle on the top lane. It seemed like he was going to kill some blue beasts. This time, Lin Chintao didn't rush forward. Instead, he darted through the bushes and sent a signal to Rao Rong. At this moment, Rao Rong had already returned to the middle lane. After leading the troops, he successfully took down one of the defense towers. The two of them attacked Qin Mo from the left and right. Lin Chintao only had one thought. Even if he couldn't take down Qin Mo's head, he could steal his beasts so he wouldn't be able to grow stronger. Everyone knew that once Qin Mo got up, with his inhuman skills, no one would be able to control him. Even Rao Rong couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't be able to stop Qin Mo's momentum. 3,000 knife cutting. Killing within 10 miles, leaving no one behind. It wasn't just a casual statement. Hence, the best way to deal with Qin Mo was to kill all the beasts he needed. Lin Chintao grasped the opportunity to jump, using his jungling skills to steal his opponent's blue beast. Lin Chintao grasped the opportunity and jumped, using his jungling skills to steal the opponent's blue monster. Qin Mo moved away, dodging the attack and reducing most of the damage. With Rao Rong's precise skills, Qin Mo dodged and avoided the attack, reducing the damage. But even so, the beasts he needed were gone. With Rao Rong's precise skills, he stood in between the two towers, within the range of the defense tower's attack. Against such a level of control, an assassin with poor control would easily be killed on the spot. That was Rao Rong's true terror. Even an expert like Qin Mo had lost half of his HP. Lin Chintao also displayed his perfect coordination. Before Qin Mo, he reached the gap between the last crystal tower and used his big move to counterattack. Just a little more and she would have killed Qin Mo, who was walking back. If Qin Mo hadn't put up a protective barrier, he would have been killed. His first HP would have been taken. Rao Rong and Lin Chintao's coordination is perfect. The shoutcaster exclaimed. Especially Lin Chintao's last move. It's a pity this game is all about luck. Since he returned to the city with low HP, it seems like Supreme Alliance is being suppressed. That isn't all, everyone knows that Qin Mo needs blue beasts in the jungle to grow stronger. Without blue beasts, his big move is useless. A useless hero, regardless of how skilled his player is, won't be able to use the 3000 knife cutting. Based on the current situation, Supreme Alliance isn't in a good spot. After the fans listened to such an explanation, every one of them seemed to be worried. Almighty Qin, who had been defeated by the 3000 knife cutting, felt so aggrieved. It seems like Rao Rong is going to lead the tempo. Rao Rong's control is indeed a tough obstacle to overcome. If they don't break through Rao Rong's trap, they will continue to lead the tempo. First, they suppressed Spade Z's hand speed and maneuvers. Now, they cut off Qin Mo's blue beasts. Only Rao Rong can execute such a plan. But come to think of it, even if Supreme Alliance loses this match, there's still the next team battle. That might be the case, but think about it, when has Qin Mo ever lost? Qin Mo hasn't lost because ever since that year, he hasn't met an expert like Xiangnan or a top player like Rao Rong. In reality, the problem is that when he meets an expert, he might not be able to unleash his full potential. Are you saying that Qin Mo's ability has weakened? You saw the chase just now. Be it you or me, the Qin Mo in everyone's memory can perform in a 1v5. If he hadn't activated his defensive skill, Lin Chintao would have taken the first HP. This is the second time he has escaped from the jaws of a tiger. Don't you think it's dangerous? The more Lin Feng listened, the more he felt that the shoutcaster hadn't played for a long time and only knew how to spout nonsense. He had escaped from the jaws of a tiger twice. Each time, he had been able to return to the city accurately, bringing along another wave of troops. Was his ability weakened? It was obvious that he had other ideas. Their captain had never played games in a straight line of thought. Even though Lin Feng wasn't sure why his captain hadn't displayed his abilities yet. But he was certain that since his captain wasn't hiding in the map like before, he wasn't discovered. That meant he had other plans. As for what that plan was, with Lin Feng's naive brain, it wasn't easy to figure it out. But Yin Wuyao, who was experienced, was different. He seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly stood up and said only one word, dragon. Dragon. Before the audience could react to Yin Wuyao's words, a line of words appeared on the huge screen in the middle. A line of words appeared on the big screen hanging in the middle. The Tyrant King has been killed by Spade Z. The Tyrant King was an extreme boss. The team that killed it would be rewarded with double the experience. But, he killed the little dragon so early. It's still the same, I'm impressed by Big Spade when it comes to killing wild beasts and bosses. As someone who often gets killed after killing dragons, I really want to know how Spade Z did it. How did he kill the dragon single-handedly? Isn't he still in the early stages? No. Yin Wuyao listened to the comments around him, his voice heavy. It isn't the early stages for the little captain and captain. The reason why Yin Wuyao would say such a thing was because he had been observing the entire time. Ever since the start of the game, wherever there was money, there would be the youngster. Many people were wrong, the jumping back and forth wasn't for the first HP. It was for the economy. Regardless of the game, the more gold coins one obtained, the stronger one's abilities would be. Besides, equipment could only be obtained with gold coins. The character that the little captain was controlling had the ability to suck blood, so he could be used as a titan. This solved the shoutcaster's problem of the character's attributes being suppressed. Besides, the little captain had already taken down the dragon, so he didn't have to be afraid of the titan. The moment Bojio killed the hidden boss, the Tyrant King, the shoutcaster was suddenly enlightened. The shoutcasters seemed to have realized something as well. They immediately got someone to bring up the financial comparison of the 4 contestants so far. That was when they realized that Spade Z's gold coins were in first place, followed by Chin Mo. Which meant that Rao Rong's team seemed to have the upper hand, but that wasn't the case. The 2 shoutcasters glanced at each other, seeing the same shock in each other's eyes. There's the most important point. Yin Weiyao held a cigarette between his fingers. He was indeed an old man, even his stance was typical of his generation. Ever since the start of the game, the little captain and the captain have never stood together, which means that they have been fighting 1 against 2. His last sentence, 1 against 2, was like a bolt of lightning, jolting everyone awake. If the shoutcaster had only been shocked. But now, they were completely shaken. Because Yin Weiyao was right. Ever since the start of the game, both Chin Mo and Spade Z had been able to control the other 2, gaining the time difference to allow the other to do what he wanted. For example, Chin Mo had wiped out the other party's jungle. For example, this time, Spade Z had killed the Tyrant King. If all of this was planned, then the 2 of them are really terrifying, the commentator murmured in disbelief. They didn't communicate at all, did they? Other than Lin Chintao's nonsense, Spade Z. Furthermore, those words sounded rather thick-skinned. How could they have thought of the same thing? There's no need to communicate in front of a true expert. Yin Weiyao held the cigarette in his mouth, looking slightly mischievous. Not to mention the 2 of them. The 2 of them. Every single one of them was able to set the tempo of the entire game. Even when they were fighting 1 against 5, they would be able to kill one of them and escape successfully. How could they only act on the surface when they were doing things? But how much trust did they have to use such a strategy? Spade Z's confidence in Chin Mo was understandable. Did Chin Mo have the same confidence in Spade Z? Did he think that even if the youngster was facing 2 people, he wouldn't be destroyed? It had to be said that such a thought was too presumptuous. However, they had really presented such a method to the public. Even if their fighting style was too domineering and they weren't convinced, so what if they wanted to develop independently? It was precisely because of their domineering nature that the cooperation between the powerhouses was different from the others. If Chin Mo had been fighting 1 against 2. The shoutcaster chuckled bitterly. I wouldn't have dared to imagine what it would be like if the 2 of them worked together. At this moment, no one dared to say that it was inappropriate for the 2 of them to choose assassins at the same time. Even though their formation wasn't compatible, it gave off an inconceivable feeling. Even Lin Chintao didn't waste any more time, focusing on the map. He knew it wasn't a suitable time to capture Spade Z because it would be difficult. Even if he managed to capture him, he would be able to defeat Spade Z in a 1-on-1 duel because of the disparity in their finances and equipment. But if their captain had followed behind him, he would have been able to kill Little Spade. Even if Little Spade's maneuvering was incredible, he would be able to do it as long as he was given an opening. But their captain had chosen Fa Tan. Under normal circumstances, Spade Z would have escaped before their captain had arrived. Lin Chintao hadn't expected their formation to suppress their opponent. At the end, it would reveal their weakness. They weren't as agile as their opponent. In other words, they couldn't kill as fast as the enemy, and they couldn't run as fast as the enemy. But Lin Chintao hadn't expected this. Qin Mo had actually given up on the blue beasts in order to protect Little Spade. Unless... Lin Chintao paused. The main attacker wasn't him, but Little Spade. Rao Rong had figured it out long before Lin Chintao could. But, was this youngster really that good? Was Qin Mo willing to assist him? That was Qin Mo. However, the silver-haired youngster in front of the computer wasn't affected by the gazes, her side profile as handsome as ever. After returning to the city, her fingers moved, flicking her black wrist guard. Her lips lifted, her handsomeness numbed their hearts. Chapter 900. Just a few words. It was like a torch, igniting everyone's gaze. For some reason, it made one's blood boil inexplicably. Just because of the youngster's words. Some of them couldn't help but clench their fists tightly. They knew that the FC King of Zone C that they were familiar with was finally returning to his original form. It's coming. Yin Weiyao said. He placed his hands down, his eyes on the screen. On the map, Qin Mo and Bo Jiao were like two arrows that had left the bow, skimming across the wilderness. They were shoulder to shoulder, as they skimmed across the grass. They were so fast they brought up a gust of wind, neither of them falling behind the other. That kind of sharpness. Be it Qin Mo or Bo Jiao, their slender fingers moved extremely quickly. Because of the rapid tapping, in that instant, there was an afterimage that shouldn't have appeared. With Qin Mo's speed and precise positioning, the moment they left the city walls, it was as though they had disappeared from the map. That was the reason why it was so effective. It was because he was so familiar with the map. He was so familiar with every inch of grass that he could accurately calculate the distance between them. This was the reason why people said that Qin Mo was invincible once he got up. Just his memory alone was enough to leave most people in the dust. Coupled with his hand speed and maneuvering, it would really make people tremble in fear. But now, Supreme Alliance had another fearsome person, Spade Z. Even Lin Chintao didn't dare to say he was alone with the youngster. After all, at this point, the other party's financial value was already double his. Hence, even if they saw Spade Z's silhouette, they wouldn't act rashly. From a certain perspective, Rao Rong was very smart. At this point, the battle in the wilderness was obviously disadvantageous to them. The other party had two assassins, such a formation was completely jungle type. They moved quickly and were good at hiding. Hence, there was a saying that most hero players knew. If you weren't confident in your skills, don't chase after the assassin. Unless you could control the stun from afar. But there was another point that they had to be wary of. In the hero game, there were many players who chased after the assassin and tank, especially in the wilderness. It was very likely that it was originally an ambush. Even if Spade Z was the only one on the map, there was no guarantee that Qin Mo wasn't there. The last two times, they had been solo. This time, they should be together. Rao Rong moved his fingers, taking a step back. His attack landed on the attacking troops. This was a signal. When Lin Chintao saw it, he wouldn't fight as recklessly as before. Because he knew very well that there was no captain. Once he went out, it would be very difficult for him to come back alive. What's more, it wasn't a good time to fight head-on. Rao Rong and Lin Chintao's tactics have changed. Usually, at this time, the commentator would come out and give a few words. Another added, "It's not surprising, the difference in equipment is too huge." Rao Rong and Lin Chintao should have spent some money and taken advantage of the minions. That way, they won't be so passive in the team battle. Everyone watched as Qin Mo and Spade Z went out together. It was a perfect ambush. If Lin Chintao appeared now, the first blood would definitely be taken. But this was the National League after all. Both Lin Chintao and Rao Rong weren't weak in terms of maneuvering and thinking. If it had been anyone else, Bo Jiao and Qin Mo would have already started killing. Because of their opponent's strength, they had used such a method to break Rao Rong's control. It seems like Supreme Alliance isn't as invincible as we imagined. But was that really the case? Very quickly, the shoutcaster realized his mistake. In the wilderness, Bo Jiao and Qin Mo had worked together to wipe out the other party's wilderness. Especially when they were fighting the blue beasts, Bo Jiao had raised her gun first, and after hitting the blue beasts, she had taken a step back, helping Qin Mo to kill all the blue beasts. The shoutcaster was stunned. Spade Z and Qin Mo are certain that the opponent wouldn't come to their wilderness. Is that why they are using such a method? They didn't seem to care if they were in their wilderness or the opponent's, or if there was any danger. It seemed as though none of these factors were within Qin Mo and Spade Z's consideration. Previously, the shoutcaster had been praising Lin Chintao's strategy. They had wiped out the beasts in Supreme Alliance's wilderness, suppressing Qin Mo from the roots. But from the looks of it, that strategy was useless against Qin Mo and Spade Z's official collaboration. Even if they didn't have the beasts, there were still some here. They could just snatch them back. Qin Mo and Spade Z were completely different from Lin Chintao. Their combined attack power was enough to kill the beasts in an instant. Spade Z didn't forget to lift his gun after wiping out the wilderness. He leaped over the wall, wiping out a line of soldiers. Then he went back to the wilderness, joining Qin Mo's attack. What are Spade Z and Qin Mo trying to do? The shoutcaster's fingers twitched when he saw the two of them heading towards the top lane. The director changed the angle, zooming in on the top lane. The audience watched as Qin Mo charged into the tower with a sword formation. He didn't care if he would be attacked by the defense tower if he started fighting under it. Without any hesitation, he headed straight for Lin Chintao. Amidst the silver light, Lin Chintao lost a third of his HP. His speed was also reduced by half a second. But it was this half a second gap. The audience watched as another figure leaped into the air with a long gun in hand. With a sweep, he lifted Lin Chintao, who had already been slowed down. His speed was incredible. Especially in that instant, the audience could only see the silver light from the long gun and silver knife. The silver-haired youngster sat in front of the computer, her hands hidden. The clacking of the keyboard sounded like the most exciting part of a piano piece. At this moment, the audience couldn't read the youngster's expression. Even in front of the camera, the youngster's side profile was covered by his messy silver hair, revealing only his slightly upturned lips. With traces of nefarious energy, he swept out with another big move. This time, Lin Chintao was really hurt. First, Qin Mo's big move had shaved off a third of his HP. Now, he was hit twice by Spade Z. His HP dropped to a small amount in an instant. In that instant, there was only one phrase in everyone's mind: tower kill. While the troops were still there, Qin Mo used his sword formation to stun Lin Chintao. Then, Spade Z used his long gun to sweep the tower, using a critical strike. There was no gap in between. The two shoutcasters' eyes were glued to the screen. While their eyes were filled with shock, the audience exploded. F***CK. Spade Z's move is so cool. Little Spade and Almighty Qin didn't even communicate, but they were able to coordinate so well. That's scary. It is indeed frightening. The moment Qin Mo came out, the opponent's Spade jumped in and used every critical hit on the blade. I wouldn't believe it if they said they didn't coordinate beforehand. That's because it's really too difficult to achieve this kind of cooperation. But more importantly, this is a tower fight. As long as Lin Chintao survives, everything will be in vain. It doesn't matter how well Spade Z and Qin Mo cooperated. The audience was right. Lin Chintao gritted his teeth, taking a step back before using his big move. If they weren't under the defense tower, Lin Chintao would have been killed instantly. He wouldn't have had the chance to use his big move. But under the defense tower, he had a chance of survival. All assassins had low HP, so they were all in the vulnerable range. Once the burst was used, there was no need to stay under the defense tower. At this moment, Lin Chintao used his big move. The health points of those who entered the tower would rapidly decrease, and they might even be killed by the heroes below the tower. Lin Chintao wasn't just any other player. He knew he couldn't run at this moment, not even thinking about it. The moment he hesitated, he would miss the opportunity and be killed instantly by the enemy's tower kill. If it had been any other player, their first reaction would have been to run. But Lin Chintao was Lin Chintao, an assassin himself. He knew how to deal with such a troublesome situation. Even though he was low on HP, his gaze was resolute. With a big move, Spade Z's HP fell. That was the end of the cool tower kill. There was another problem. Lin Chintao was at the bottom of the defense tower. He could use the defense tower's attack power to counterattack. But it was one thing for Lin Chintao to be skilled, but Bojiu wasn't. Just as Lin Chintao was about to use his second move, Bojiu swung her long spear, leaping out of the defense tower. She changed her angle and led the troops to attack the tower. That was too fast, too swift. It wasn't easy for Lin Chintao to take the first kill. That wasn't all, the youngster's entire body exuded an indescribable pressure. Lin Chintao understood instantly. He wouldn't be able to defend the defense tower. Besides, he was low on HP. It wasn't safe for him to return to the city. Both Qin Mo and Spade Z had crossed the defense tower. From the looks of it, there might be a second attempt. Hence, he had to run back. It might have taken a long time to describe, but in reality, it had only been 10 seconds since Qin Mo had cut in. Everything happened too quickly. Amidst the sparks, Lin Chintao started to retreat with his HP low. The shoutcaster laughed. It isn't that easy, Qin Mo and Spade Z's teamwork doesn't seem to be enough to cross the defense tower. However, before he could finish his sentence, a silver-white clothed figure appeared on the screen, as if he had been waiting between the two towers. He dashed towards Lin Chintao, who was returning to the city. Swoosh! A sword formation appeared. Chapter 901. First kill. Supreme Alliance's first kill. The audience couldn't react in time. After all, the player on the screen was Spade Z's side. When they heard the sound effect, they were stunned for 0.1 seconds. Who died? The director changed the scene immediately. That was when they saw Lin Chintao's body lying between the two towers. Of course, there was also the tall figure standing between the two towers, his robes fluttering in the wind. Tower kill. They couldn't kill him by just one tower. They would have to cross two towers. That was the end of their teamwork. Qin Mo and Bojiu's teamwork would never end. The two figures were still on the map. The audience couldn't wait any longer. Hurry up and replay it. We want to see the replay. Indeed, the scene had to be replayed. It was too fast. Lin Chintao was still sprinting back to the city when a sword formation suddenly appeared. A sword formation suddenly appeared over there without any warning. Even the silhouettes of people were so fast that they couldn't be seen. The silver glow was the explosive force from the clash of weapons. Blood splattered everywhere. Just like that, he took the first kill arrogantly. Lin Chintao gritted his teeth. Despicable, you actually hid in the bushes beside the two towers, waiting for me to retreat so you could kill me. Isn't that the move you used on me just now? Have you forgotten it so quickly? Qin Mo's voice rang out, noble and calm. Lin Chintao wasn't the only one who stilled, even the shoutcaster. The next second, Lin Chintao came alive. F***CK, Qin Mo, can you stop being so vengeful? I can't, Qin Mo replied as he moved his mouse over a blood-sucking beast, rejecting him calmly. At this moment, Bojiu swept her long spear. Not only was the defense tower destroyed, but even the soldiers were cleared by her. Bojiu thought to herself, Lin Chintao, aren't you kidding me by asking the Almighty to stop being vengeful? His greatest strength was vengeance. Bojiu, who had her dark history flipped, finally saw someone who was in a worse state than her. Hence, she approved of the Almighty's counterattack. His handsome face was incomparably serious as he killed. Lin Chintao wanted to vomit blood. When the two of them cooperated, it didn't seem like they were playing a game, but more like bandits. He didn't even give them a chance to breathe. At this point, Lin Chintao could already feel the pressure. But he was an assassin. If he were to back down now, there would be no way for him to continue the match. Thus, Lin Chintao didn't retreat. Instead, he charged forward to clear the troops. Rao Rong's fingers were a little dull. Because he knew very well that at the start of the match, that guy kept saying that he couldn't be a burden to him. But the truth was that he was dragging him down. His hand speed was much slower than before, and coupled with his lack of understanding of Spade Z, it resulted in the current situation. He had thought that using the Titan formation would completely suppress the other party, making it impossible for them to rush over. But the consequence was that he couldn't keep up with Lin Chintao. If they couldn't keep up, it would be very difficult for them to cooperate. If the opponent was someone else, they would definitely win. But they were facing Qin Mo and Spade Z. They weren't just full of explosive power, they were adept at maneuvering and evading. They had even specially chosen characters that could leap over walls and towers. These skills would allow them to kill and escape at the most crucial moment. This had been a trap from the start. Chapter 902. Captain. Lin Chintao's voice came over. His eyes were a little dark. I'll work hard. Even now, he was still saying, as long as I can keep up with you, we won't lose, right? Captain. Rao Rong's gaze dimmed. He suppressed the emotions that were welling up in his throat, ignoring the vibrating phone in his pocket. He stared at the screen like an unwavering gemstone, standing there quietly. Yes. Rao Rong was a leader. It wasn't just because of his maneuvering and team control. It was also because, at times, just his presence could instill immense confidence. Lin Chintao was such a person. When everyone joined a team, it was because of the Almighty. It was all because of the Almighty's presence in the team. In that instant, when you saw his maneuvering, you would be amazed at how such a handsome gamer could exist in this world. To Lin Chintao, Rao Rong was such a presence. He moved his mouse, gliding past the line of soldiers, taking away a wild beast. The audience watched as Lin Chintao sped up. That wasn't all. Rao Rong walked out from the bottom of the tower, pushing the middle tower as though he had no fear. But upon closer inspection, it was clear. It wasn't because he wasn't afraid, but because of Rao Rong and Lin Chintao's positioning. Even though one of them was in the jungle and the other was in the middle lane, they were extremely close. It was almost as though they were advancing at the same time, completely different from before. But in this wave of soldiers, the tower was smashed into pieces. Even in such a situation, they aren't overwhelmed by the mental pressure, as expected of a strong team. If it had been anyone else, they probably wouldn't have had the courage to come out. After facing Qin Mo and Spade Z's attacks, how many of them could reignite their fighting spirit? They even took the chance to destroy one of Supreme Alliance's defense towers. Seems like Rao Rong and Lin Chintao have recovered. To be honest, if it were me, I would have been disheartened long ago. Thinking about Almighty Qin's move just now, he crossed 2 floors. In other words, if he could do it once, he could do it a second time. It would be a psychological burden. That's right. It isn't just Almighty Qin, even Spade Z is a player who can fight through the tower. If it isn't safe to stand at the bottom of the tower, it would be a little frustrating. But I realized something. As long as Rao Rong is around, it'll be hard for us to cross the tower and kill him because his mind control is really good. It's not a problem for him to stand under the tower, but once he leaves the tower, I can't guarantee his safety. As soon as this person's voice fell, everyone saw a white figure flash past, a silver gleaming sword formation rising, trapping Rao Rong. A PK between the two captains. Everyone widened their eyes and stared unblinkingly, afraid that they would miss out on any details. 2 years had passed. No one knew who was stronger, Rao Rong or Qin Mo. But looking at their finances, Qin Mo seemed to have the upper hand. Second drop of blood. The crowd cheered. What they wanted to see the most was the continuation of the hot-blooded battle. But Rao Rong had never been one of the Supreme Alliance members. In the sword formation, he was forced to take a step back. Chapter 903. This control, it's beautiful. It was indeed beautiful. He had managed to immobilize Qin Mo. Fortunately, he wasn't at the bottom of the tower. If he was at the bottom of the tower, it was highly possible that Qin Mo would be killed. The effect of Rao Rong's control was that all his moves couldn't be used. Moreover, it had a defensive function. The closer he was to him, the faster his HP would be depleted. Lin Chintao glanced over, using a big move to close in, wanting to take Qin Mo down. But Qin Mo was faster, activating the protective barrier. With a flash, he returned to the bushes, leaving behind a streak of silver. This time, Qin Mo's HP was low. Lin Chintao didn't give chase. Because he knew there would be a follow-up. Indeed, there would be a follow-up. The next moment, a figure darted over, a long spear lifting Rao Rong into the air. With a big move, half of Rao Rong's HP was gone. At this moment, Rao Rong was out of control. It would take more than 10 seconds for his control to recover. The figure was agile, not giving Lin Chintao any chance to get close. The moment he saw Rao Rong, he dodged before turning back for another attack. Rao Rong was still dead. Rao Rong was left with less than a third of his HP. On the big screen, the silver light from the spear made it hard for the audience to see clearly. It was too fast, so fast that they couldn't catch it. The director changed the angle swiftly, switching to Spade Z's view. Only then did everyone clearly see the attack that the spear had launched. As the silver light streaked past, the silhouette also changed. Every move and every style was unbelievably handsome. But Lin Chintao's defense was already starting to drain the youngster's HP. The audience held their breaths. The shoutcaster was tense. It's too forceful. It was 2v1, no matter how strong Spade Z was, he wouldn't be able to kill Rao Rong alone. Indeed, it wasn't possible because Lin Chintao was still in pursuit, restricting Spade Z's attack. Bo Jiao moved her right hand, dodging Lin Chintao's first attack but not Rao Rong's control. The youth was pinned down on the spot. It was a small matter that his HP was decreasing. What was more important was that once an assassin was pinned down and unable to move, there would only be one outcome, death. Spade Z shouldn't have gone up alone. Rao Rong is Rao Rong after all. Spade Z underestimated him. But was he really going alone? Not necessarily. Yin Weiyao noticed Qin Mo's finger. That momentary deviation. The next second, a silvery white figure appeared on the screen. He leaped out of the bushes and turned to attack. With a sword formation, he froze Rao Rong in place. KO. Before Spade Z's HP was depleted, Rao Rong was already lying on the ground. The second drop of blood. But the second drop of blood wasn't worth it for the Supreme Alliance. The reason was simple. Both of them were on the verge of death. Once Lin Chintao unleashed his ultimate move, he would at least be able to take one of their heads. Hence, Supreme Alliance hadn't won this 2-on-2 battle. Lin Chintao's eyes turned red. He sped towards Spade Z, delivering a critical strike. Blood splattered everywhere, and Spade Z collapsed just like that. The cheers from Supreme Alliance were stuck in their throats. The last time the youth had lost, he had also been killed by Lin Chintao. This time, history was repeating itself. The joy of obtaining the second blood was like someone had poured a bucket of ice water over his head, extinguishing all the joy that had welled up in his heart. Because at the moment when the youth fell, Chapter 904. It wasn't because Spade Z was weak, but because his opponents were getting stronger. Lin Chintao was no longer the same person from the regional competition. It was probably because he had the most suitable partner that he could fully utilize his advantages. Compared to Spade Z, he wasn't that much weaker. He had speed and positioning, especially with Rao Rong's control. It was a terrifying sight to behold. They could only pray that Almighty Qin could escape. But what confused them was that Almighty Qin didn't seem to have any intention of escaping. Why was that? Was he just going to fight Lin Chintao at such a low HP level? He couldn't win at all. Even Almighty Qin couldn't do that, right? What was wrong with Almighty Qin today? Why wasn't he playing according to the rules? Just as the audience was wondering, the shoutcaster raised his voice. One of the shoutcasters suddenly raised his voice. Resurrection armor. Spade Z has a revival armor. Revival armor, as the name suggested, was a piece of equipment that could revive someone on the spot. When playing a game, the person who set the tempo of the game would usually wear such a piece of equipment. Of course, in order to have such an equipment, one had to have enough gold coins. Could this be the reason why Spade Z has been plundering the troops, killing the Tyrant King, and even the beasts by the side of the road? The shoutcaster was in disbelief. Revival armor. Some of the audience who didn't understand were stunned for a moment, but Lin Chintao wasn't. But Lin Chintao wasn't a fool. After killing Spade Z, he realized something was wrong. As a veteran player, he knew what was going on. But no one had expected little Spade to have a revival armor. How did he get it? He didn't have it before. This was the question everyone was concerned about. Besides Lin Feng, the shoutcaster, and the entire audience. The director sat at the backstage directing, watching as the number of views reached its peak. Because it was a live broadcast. When the shoutcaster shouted those 3 words, veteran gods of the game sent luxury cars one after another to the live broadcast room. After all, this double fight was really cool. A lot of people wanted to know when Spade Z had released the resurrection armor. The advantage of watching a live broadcast was that while watching the battle, half of the screen was used to explain the equipment of the players. This time, the National League would be broadcasted live on all platforms. The broadcasting team was the most professional, and they knew what everyone wanted to see. He immediately pulled up the video of Spade Z. At that time, Spade Z was still under Rao Rong's control. The young man brought up the equipment changing page with his left hand and clicked the mouse with his right hand. He quickly sold his other equipment and used all his gold coins to buy the resurrection armor. At that time, Spade Z was still alive and had half a tank of HP. However, what they didn't expect was that the young man would change his attire at this time. Just how fast was his hand speed to be able to complete this action in an instant? Just by looking at the few pages that the young man had flipped quickly, one could understand. This was truly heaven-defying. After all, the audience on the other side of the internet was the audience on the other side of the internet. The scene here was the hottest. Many pairs of eyes were staring at the big screen, and even their breathing seemed to slow down. Time had clearly passed very quickly. But at this moment, it seemed to have been stretched infinitely. No matter how complicated Lin Chintao's thoughts were, his first reaction was to stab Spade Z on the spot. But his ultimate move was gone. It wasn't lethal enough. Players who were new to Hero always thought that the key to victory was how much HP one had. In reality, that wasn't the case. Firstly, it was the character's equipment and finances. Of course, most importantly, the difference between the two depended on whether the character you were controlling had a killer move or not. If it was used up, how was he going to fight? Besides, he was facing Spade Z. At this moment, the director swiftly shifted the camera angle. The youngster, who had been lying on the ground, stood up once more. Just as Lin Chintao was about to dodge, his long spear sweeping across, a silver flash. Within 10 meters, there was no one. Lin Chintao was already having a hard time dealing with such a silver flash. At this moment, Qin Mo, who was beside him, closed in, his clothes fluttering, his long sword like a rainbow. In an instant, Lin Chintao's HP was reduced to a critical level. Moreover, Qin Mo's move had greatly reduced his speed. Fortunately, the defense tower was just ahead. As long as he could reach the bottom of the tower, he would be able to escape this pursuit. At this moment, Lin Chintao's palms were drenched in sweat. Even his team members were clenching their fists tightly. Rao Rong was counting down the seconds until his resurrection. 3 seconds left. At this moment, Lin Chintao had reached the bottom of the tower, but had he really escaped? Just as some of them heaved a sigh of relief, they watched as the youngster leaped up, waving her mouse. Her left hand moved swiftly, her long spear piercing through the enemy before retreating swiftly. Behind her, only the silver flash of weapons and the dazzling sky were left. Tower crossing, kill. KO. When these two words crossed the screen. Amidst the silver flowers, the long spear on his back, his sleeves fluttering. The youngster on the horse stood proudly, the silver light falling behind him. In that instant, many fangirls couldn't help standing up, holding their faces as they shrieked, Spade Z. Even the most handsome back view couldn't compare. Everything in the game became that person's back view. After killing the enemy, the youngster lifted his long spear, taking 2 slow steps forward before sweeping past swiftly, killing another wave of soldiers. The tower was destroyed, and the soldiers were dead. In this double fight, Supreme Alliance managed to take down 2 players. Both of them didn't return to the city. Instead, like 2 bolts of lightning, they split up into the wilderness on the left and right sides. They killed monsters to replenish their HP, as though it was planned. After sweeping everything, they regrouped in the middle lane. When they regrouped, the HP bar was already full. Even the shoutcasters stood up when they saw this scene. This year's Supreme Alliance, they were really strong. So strong that it wasn't within their expectations. Regardless of the commentator, they couldn't explain their fighting style, it was too illogical. There was no need for words, just kill. Even Qin Mo's fighting style was brand new, more lethal than usual. That was because he didn't have to worry about the entire field, he just had to fight alongside his teammates. Could this be the secret weapon that Feng Yi mentioned? The other club managers were starting to fall into a daze. They recalled Feng Yi's smiling face during the gathering, the words he had said while holding a glass of red wine. They had assumed that Feng Yi had poached Spade Z to anger them. From the looks of it, Wang Bang hadn't just been referring to the new king, Spade Z. Chapter 905. On the screen, the two of them had joined forces and forcefully destroyed one of the defense towers. After Rao Rong revived, he could only defend the middle tower. The defense towers on both sides had been destroyed by the troops. After the two of them split up, they attacked from both sides. Rao Rong couldn't go anywhere. It wasn't just wrong, it was too late. Was this Supreme Alliance's strategy? The two shoutcasters seemed to be at a loss for words, unable to utter a single word. At this moment, in the highest circle of the audience, a handsome man sat lazily on a designated VIP seat. A handsome man sat lazily on a special VIP seat. The visual effect was the best here, and he could see the big screen in front of him. Even the seat was more comfortable than usual. It seemed like this was the only way he could stretch his long legs. It wasn't an exaggeration to call him a handsome man. 2 buttons on his white shirt were undone, revealing his elegant neck. His face was extremely flirtatious. His silky black hair was tied behind him, but he didn't look feminine at all. Moreover, he was extremely handsome. Is this the person you wanted to see? The handsome man tilted his head, glancing at the person beside him with an arched brow. It wasn't anyone else, it was Hoshino. He had a gentle face and a natural composure. No matter what he saw, there would always be a smile on his face. Especially when he looked at Bojo, his smile would deepen, soothing like water. Tisk, tsk, tsk. The handsome man shook his head and turned to place his arm by Hoshino's side. Look at how sweet your smile is. Those who don't know might think you're related to someone else. You're just a little better at gaming. Hoshino tilted his head, looking at the handsome face inches away. Now you should know why I care so much about Supreme Alliance. Chi Namo, Spade Z, the handsome man laughed, his finger sliding across his chin. These two aren't bad. If I'm not wrong, Chi Namo should be playing the same way as me. But you aren't looking at Chi Namo, it's that person, the youngster with dyed silver hair. Hoshino, when did you learn to appreciate others? Hoshino took a sip of tea. Why do I sound like an arrogant B***star to you? You don't even know how to appreciate others. The pretty boy glanced at Hoshino, breaking into a lazy smile. Alright, the competition is about to end early. The winner will definitely be Supreme Alliance. You saw what you wanted to see, can you go back now? It's tiring for me to keep you company. Hoshino looked at the lazy man and stood up. Let's go. Indeed, it's time to go. If you don't leave now, I'm starting to wonder who you're going to fall in love with. Mainan put one hand in his pocket. Once he got up, he became even more domineering. With his background, he had never been a simple character. Hoshino was very clear about this. Hoshino didn't refute Mainan's words and was the first to walk forward. The pretty boy also took 2 steps forward. However, after that, he turned around sharply. His phoenix-like eyes swept over the silver-haired youth sitting in front of the computer. The corners of his mouth curled up, and there was an indescribable sense of danger. Just like a lion living in the grassland, it looked extremely elegant, but in fact, it was more difficult to provoke than anyone else. Spade Z. What exactly is in your body? Chapter 906. Everyone knew that this was the end of the match. The defense towers on both sides had been destroyed. The defense tower on the middle lane had been destroyed by Chi Nemo and Bojo. The difference in their finances was too great, even Rao Rong couldn't stop them. But no one could deny that this was an exciting match. If not, the match wouldn't have lasted for nearly 2 hours. Even when they reached the bottom of the city, they didn't succeed immediately. He did not succeed immediately. The tug-of-war lasted for half an hour. At the end, Qin Mo had used the revival armor. Bojiu had sacrificed her life to take down the enemy's city. As the pieces fell, two huge words appeared on the screen. Everyone in the audience stood up. Lin Feng turned back and looked at Yun Hu with his most handsome and brilliant smile. "Who, we won." Yes, Supreme Alliance had won. A 1v1 and 2v2 victory. Even if there was a team battle, it wouldn't affect the outcome. The shoutcaster was still in a daze. He watched as the youngster and Qin Mo stood up. Their backs were always eye-catching and handsome. Coupled with their pure black uniforms, they looked like the commanders in the Star Trek movies. The shoutcaster finally understood what it meant to be the king of bombs. If this was the Supreme Alliance, they were indeed qualified to go up against Xiangnan. Lin Chintao was the only one who hadn't stood up in front of the computer. If he had been a little faster, as long as he had been a little faster, perhaps, if he had been smarter, the outcome wouldn't have been like this. Why hadn't he thought of the revival armor? Lin Chintao gripped the mouse tightly, his fringe covering his expression. But even then, the corners of his lips had sunk. At this moment, a hand pressed down on his head, a clear voice saying, "We can come back next year." It was Rao Rome, his chiseled side profile as though no matter what happened, he would always look the same. Lin Chintao couldn't take it anymore. He rubbed his nose and bolted upright, his voice muffled. Yes. Seriously, in front of their captain, he was just like a loyal dog. Bojiu glanced over. Her guard against Rao Rong had lessened. Instead, she could help Rao Rong with other matters. After all, that chatterbox Lin Chintao probably wouldn't want to see such a good captain leave. The team members gathered together. Feng Yi was here to deliver the news. No matter what, his lips were always curled into a sly smile. The results of the match between Xiangnan and Dream City are out. As he spoke, he glanced at his team members. 3 o'clock, Xiangnan wins. This result was not unexpected, and could even be said to be within his expectations. But ever since the start of the National League, Xiangnan's record had always been 3 o'clock. What caught everyone's attention was that not all of their starting members had appeared, which meant that they still had some strength left. Lin Fang's expression became serious again. "We will also win 3-0 today." There was still a team battle. Regardless of whether Supreme Alliance had won or not, respecting the opponent was the best way to answer to oneself. Feng Yi chuckled. Good luck. Many assumed that Supreme Alliance was competing with Xiangnan. In fact, ever since Supreme Alliance debuted, they had always been competing with him. In the esports industry, strength spoke louder than words. That was how they lived up to their youth. The atmosphere around Lin Chintao's team was heavy. His team members hung their heads, their faces filled with dejection. With the outcome already in their grasp, they didn't wish to participate in the third match. Rao Rong glanced over, pressing onto one of their shoulders. Do you want everyone to think that we don't have the magnanimity to compete in the third match? What's there to compete for? We have already lost. Li Nuo scoffed. You bragged about how amazing you were when you came back, but you still lost. Lin Chintao really wanted to stuff this young master back into the womb and reforge him. He would never understand that if it hadn't been for their captain, their team would have lost even worse. Did he really think that Spade Z and Qin Mo's teamwork was as simple as it seemed? Lin Chintao clenched his fists, wanting to retort. But a deep voice came from beside him. I was the one who dragged you down in the double match, but you have to participate in the team battle. It isn't about winning or losing, but if you give up the chance to fight, you will never understand what kind of team Supreme Alliance is. All the research and data are useless against them because they are stronger every second. That is Supreme Alliance. Rao Rong's gaze deepened as he looked at his team members. Are you going to be left behind? One of them bolted upright. I'll play. Chen Nuo couldn't understand them at all, they were being unreasonable. Since he wasn't going to participate, he might as well let the little one he had bullied take his place. The little one was truly a newbie, his hands trembling as he held the mouse. However, esports seemed to have this kind of magic. Even though he was a newbie, he wanted to fight alongside the seniors of the team. He didn't care about the outcome, he just wanted to be worthy of the person who had once studied the Almighty even when he was exhausted. The team battle began. For those who only cared about winning or losing, the competition was over. 10 kilometers away from the esports arena. In an apartment building. Ding! A message came from the computer. The tall and slender man closed the chat box, walking towards the sweet-looking girl. Rao Rong lost and the money has been transferred. Shouldn't we prepare the sacrificial offerings? Let's wait a while more. The girl's fingers swiped across the screen, her lips curling into a sinister smile. Rao Rong didn't lose intentionally. Shock flashed across the tall and slender man's face. You mean, as expected, those who aren't of our race can't work together with us? The girl's voice became colder and colder. If that's the case, then throw him out first. The major crimes unit is so strict, there has to be someone to bear all the blame. Go back and tell him, as long as he confesses to these crimes, I will avenge his father. This is his last chance, I don't have much patience. The tall and slender man chuckled. You should have done that a long time ago. A dog that isn't loyal to us will only bite us in the end. I'll get it done now. This way, the crime squad's attention will be on Rao Rong, giving us a chance to sell our goods. The Golden Triangle is starting to get anxious, do you think we should give Rao Rong a shot? It'll be easier for him to control. There's no need for that, Qin Mo will notice. The girl's face was filled with both love and hatred. That person isn't easy to deal with, you know that. The tall and slender man glanced up, his gaze deep. I'm afraid he won't be as formidable in the future. The girl turned back, looking at him. The tall and slender man continued, the higher-up said that the crime squad's newly hired senior criminal psychologist has arrived. That's good. The girl's eyes dimmed, the venom in them sending chills down one's spine. Oh right, have you found the person I asked you to investigate? The tall and slender man shook his head. As of now, no one has admitted to the cyber attack. That isn't all, no one knows who did it. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be such a powerful expert in China. Could it have been a coincidence that you were attacked that day? But it wasn't without results. Qin Mo seems to have an expert hacker with him, someone he poached from the public. As you know, his codename is Fatty and he was in the mall that day. Perhaps he was the one behind it. Got it. Think of a way to flirt with Master Wu inside. The girl glanced at her nails. I want to know what exactly she did to make Qin Mo deal with the Wu family. More importantly, what information does she have on Spade Z? That's the only way to create trouble. I've said it before, if you want to destroy a person, you have to start with the people around him. This is the most important thing. The tall and slender man's gaze darkened. Don't worry, I'll do it immediately. The girl didn't say anything else. In her heart, she also felt that perhaps it was because of a moment of carelessness that she was locked onto that person's position. After all, no one in the hacker forum had admitted to it. It could have been Fatty. The girl didn't give up completely, using the internet to investigate further. She had investigated almost all the top few hackers on the hacker ranking board, but there weren't any clues. At this moment, the internet phone rang. It was the higher-ups. The girl lifted the corner of her lips and pressed the call button. This time, everyone earned well. Shouldn't you give us some convenience? Our goods have to be sold eventually. I called you to tell you about this. Now that the storm has passed, you can do as you please. If there's a sudden inspection, I'll inform you. How is it my business? It's our business. I've prepared everything on my side, including the people and the goods. We'll let the female students get involved first, and then we can open the market. You should know that young people these days like to play. Novelty is very exciting for them. Of course, I know that. But why did you suddenly come to China? If it's just for business, why did you create so much trouble? Using the murder case as a cover, just to earn money. This was a test. The person understood that some things should be done and some things shouldn't be done. The girl looked at the bags of white powder, her lips lifting into a smile. Of course it's to earn money. Using this to gradually control the entire country. That was the purpose of this operation. But of course, the girls wouldn't say anything. The person didn't probe further, just reminding, don't go overboard, earn money, don't do anything else. The crime squad can only stall for a while. I understand. The girl replied, don't worry, I don't like killing people. Watching them commit suicide. Letting that person know that not everyone in this world was humane. That was her motive. Qin Mo should have joined them a long time ago. Only by joining them would he be able to unleash his full potential. People like them were the ones standing at the top of the pyramid. Toying with the fates of others was the most beautiful thing. But that person always had his own insistence. Since he was insistent, she would destroy his roots, at the same time, in the city center. Director Huang's office. A person was sprawled there, holding a magnifying glass. He was of mixed blood, but because of his European heritage, he had a strong presence. He looked like a gentleman from the British aristocracy. His fingers tapped on the documents, and he quickly locked onto his target. That day, I think it's necessary to investigate everyone in the cinema. Don't you Chinese have a saying, you'd rather kill 1,000 wrongly than let one go? Director Huang thought, bro, where did you get your Chinese from? Besides, we are a country governed by law, we aren't violent. Mr. Smith, other than this, what else do you need from us? With his leader around, Director Huang still gave face to the foreign guest. Smith glanced at him. I heard you have a criminal psychologist here and it has been almost a month but there aren't any leads on Z. Since that's the case, I would like him to hand over all the authority to me. I don't mean to snatch anything from him, but I will take the lead and he will cooperate. That way, there won't be any problems. After all, criminal psychologists aren't able to keep up with us when it comes to certain things. When Director Huang heard those words, he really wanted to give Qin Mo a call. He would put the phone on speaker so that Qin Mo could hear how she despised him. These days, there weren't many people who dared to despise young Master Qin. So, Mr. Smith, you're saying that Z is the culprit behind this series of cases? MMH, the foreigner replied. He pondered for a moment before replying, there is a 90% similarity in the crime but I have to confirm the rest. I understood the situation before coming, your criminal psychologist overturned my previous definition. He doesn't think Z is the culprit. I've crossed hands with Z more than 10 times on Fifth Avenue and I know Z's style better than anyone else. Hence, we can't let our guard down. Director Huang, little Huang didn't want to say anything else. He just wanted to call young Master Qin. Fortunately, the foreigner didn't continue attacking, instead, he started with his analysis of the case. After listening to the entire process, Director Huang felt that this matter was getting deeper and deeper. He had a very bad feeling about this. But he couldn't put his finger on it. At 5 p.m., at the esports venue, the competition officially ended. As the victor, MVP Qin Mo had to be interviewed as usual. Chapter 907. Bojo arched a brow. I'm just buying a bottle of water. Why do I have to leave now that I'm here? What happened to the basic trust between humans? Chin Mo glanced at the youngster before turning towards the bodyguard beside him. Buy a bottle of water for young Master Joe. Yes, Boss Chin. The bodyguards dressed in black would usually disguise themselves as assistants and follow Chin Mo around. This was a decision made by Chin Shi's parents after that year to ensure Chin Mo's safety. Bojo watched the bodyguard leave before turning towards Chin Mo. The Almighty obviously didn't believe her. Didn't he say that sleeping with him would lower his guard's guard? This reason didn't seem to work in front of the Almighty. The words on the internet couldn't be trusted. Chin Mo seemed to be done admiring the youngster's gloomy expression. He was in a good mood. What else do you want? I'll get someone to buy it. Water will do. Bojo stuffed her hands into her pockets, a smile on her lips. She couldn't lose to the Almighty in a battle of wits and courage. But, Brother Mo, can you let go of my collar first? It wasn't nice to be dragged around like that. Chin Mo lifted the corners of his lips, looking suave. He inched closer to the youngster's face. I'll let you go when we reach the interview location. Chin Mo was a man of his words. But even if he let go of the youngster, he would still be within his sight. Hence, the interviewer couldn't help turning to look at the youngster that Almighty Chin had tossed onto the seat beside him. It was already the finals of the National League. Therefore, this interview was different from any other interview. It was conducted through a collaboration between the live stream platform and the media. It was akin to a mini live stream. Even though it wasn't long, it was at least 7 minutes. The host would conduct a simple interview with Chin Mo based on the questions raised by the audience in the live broadcast room. She had already done one interview with Xiangnan. Now, it was Supreme Alliance's turn. The interviewer watched the youngster for another day. As expected, the atmosphere was different. Chin Mo might have said that he wanted to control her strictly, but in reality, other than the water, he had gotten his bodyguard to buy some snacks and tossed them into the youngster's arms. Bojo was a foodie. She ate almost everything in sight. His appetite was also very big. At this time, his stomach was indeed a little empty, especially after a match. It was a little taxing on his brain. It had to be said that the Almighty was very considerate at times. Besides, Bojo had nothing better to do. Hence, she opened a bag, biting on a finger biscuit while watching the Almighty being interviewed. His silver hair was tied up by a hairpin, and his side profile was clean and handsome. There was a youthful smile on his lips, which was very seductive. He was completely unaware of how strong his presence was. The female host tried her best to pull her gaze back and clear her throat. After seeing the youngster, she was inspired. She changed the question she had prepared beforehand and said with a slight smile, Almighty Chin, after this competition, the internet is saying that you and Spade Z are the king of Supreme Alliance. When you two work together, it's like a pair of kings. I wonder how you guys managed to develop such chemistry. Is it convenient for you to tell me? Bojo paused in the middle of eating the biscuit when she heard her name being called. Her bright eyes and white teeth were indeed attractive. Chin Mo glanced at a certain someone who seemed to be in a daze, and a hint of a smile flashed across his eyes. He was a little black-bellied. When he looked at the camera again, his expression was neutral. We eat and sleep together, it's only natural that we have chemistry. The female host seemed to be in disbelief. She tried hard to suppress the urge to scream, pretending to be calm as she repeated, eating and sleeping together is indeed helpful in developing chemistry. But don't forget, this was a live broadcast. After Chin Mo said that, the live stream was flooded with comments. Oh my God, what exactly did I hear? The Almighty and Big Spade are living together. They eat and sleep together, I'm just concerned about how they sleep together, starry eyes. Wait a minute, did Almighty Chin look like he was looking at someone? I have the same feeling. Logically speaking, shouldn't Almighty Chin be looking at the camera during a live broadcast? Let's not talk about this first. Host, hurry up and ask, is Almighty Chin living together with Big Spade? I feel like I'm breaking up. What should I do? I just fell in love with a youngster, how did he end up with someone else so quickly? There were too many people asking the same question. Even if the host wanted to avoid it, she couldn't pretend she didn't see it. Besides, it was such a curious matter. The host didn't want to avoid it, hence, she continued probingly, in order to improve chemistry, some team members would indeed stay together when they booked a hotel. They would also have 2 to 3 days of training to discuss strategies. Is it the same for Almighty Chin and Spade Z? No. It was a surprising answer. Chin Mo's face didn't change at all, as though it was an ordinary matter. We stay together. This time, even the female host stuttered. Live together. MMH, Bo Jio frowned. When did this happen? Why wasn't she aware of it? At this time, the female host was so excited that she didn't know what to say. After all, this news was a real topic and benefit for some fans. The comments in the live streaming channel could no longer be controlled. Waves of ah. The female host calmed herself down. Almighty Chin, you're saying that you're living together. Living together. You can understand it that way. Chin Mo's voice was calm. He stood there, exuding an air of nobility. Especially since he was wearing a Star Trek commander's uniform, it made him look even more aloof. But he just had to drop such a bomb. It was obvious that she admitted to living together. This was not the end. When he saw the youngster stand up, Chin Mo turned his head. Even though his voice was faint, everyone watching the live stream could hear him. Wait for me a little longer. But in an instant, another wave of comments exploded on the screen. I was wondering why the Almighty kept looking in that direction. So there really is someone there. Ah, did you hear the Almighty's tone just now? There's a hint of command in his pampering and connivance in his command. I bet $100 that the person beside him is definitely Big Spade. Another $100. I never expected Big Spade to be such a loyal dog. He even knows to wait by the side when the Almighty is doing a live stream. How obedient. Now, as long as I close my eyes, I can imagine the way those two people interact. One is doing a live interview, and the other is waiting by the side. I can feel their love through the screen. What should I do? They are all from the same team, those CP fans shouldn't overthink it. Just stay close or you'll just bring shame to your Almighty Spade. After someone said that, the popularity would die down. However, Chin Mo could see the topics from this end of the live stream. His gaze paused on the last topic, his eyes darkening. Then he glanced over. The audience has already guessed that you're a listener. Come over and greet everyone. Listener. That means there really is someone else. The audience couldn't control their excitement. This time, Bojo couldn't leave even if she wanted to. On the other hand, all the reporters were shocked. When did the Almighty become so polite during a live stream? So passionate. In the past, the Almighty had never interacted with the audience. Unless there was a technical question, he would say it. The rest of the time, he would reply with an MMH or, I don't know. It was unprecedented for him to pay attention to the comments left by the audience. On the other side, the silver-haired youngster placed a hand in his pocket and smiled. I won't be appearing on the screen. Isn't this Brother Mo's personal live stream? The voice that was as clear as water came out. It wasn't impatient, it was a little deep. The audience's blood was boiling as they listened to this. F***ck, it's really my big spade. What did I say? Only Big Spade can make the almighty like this. The two of them are even together during the live stream. I don't believe there isn't anything between them. Let me emphasize, I'm a straight man. This isn't convincing at all. But I really want to see Big Spade appear on the screen. The small screen during the competition isn't enough. With almighty Chin's possessiveness, he probably won't let Big Spade appear. You better give up. It had to be said that this fan was right on point. Indeed, Chin Mo wouldn't let her appear. The reason why he allowed her to speak was to dispel the arrogant thoughts of others. He had already made it obvious enough. He couldn't wait to let everyone know. This person was his. As expected, after Chin Mo spoke, the people who had been warning the CP fans not to let their imaginations run wild disappeared automatically. In the next few minutes of the interview, Chin Mo would exchange a few words with the youngster from time to time. Someone asked, "Almighty, what is Big Spade doing while you are doing a live stream?" Chin Mo asked calmly. "Your Big Spade is eating biscuits." Some people started to imagine the answer. Thinking about the youngster's face, he would be handsome no matter what he ate. It was inevitable that they would be infatuated for a while. But this couldn't compare to the fact that they could see two male almighties at the same time in a live stream, even though one of them only revealed his voice and not his face. But in the eyes of the fans, this was already enough to satisfy them. After all, it was a combined interview between the two of them. This round of dog food wasn't too much or too little, it was just right. The live stream came to an end. The female host held on to the microphone. "Thank you, Almighty Chin, for accepting our interview. Thank you, Almighty Spade Z, for listening. I hope Supreme Alliance can bring us more surprises in the upcoming competition." Just like that, the interview ended. Bojio had mysteriously cohabited with someone. Movie Queenan, who was far away in England, was watching the video. At that time, she had been holding an apple in her hand. It was a must for all actors to maintain a perfect figure in order to act. But even so, when she heard her son's reply, Movie Queenan was shocked as well. Even though she knew that her son treated Joe differently, she hadn't expected it to be this different. Cohabiting. Her son, who had always liked peace and couldn't wait to be alone in a room every day. He was actually cohabiting with someone. Movie Queenan hung up her phone. Her nose was straight and her eyes were mesmerizing. But somehow, she felt that something wasn't what she had imagined. Would Chin Mo and Joe be too good for each other? That was Movie Queenan's only worry. Her eyes were filled with righteousness. In the end, she stood up and said to the person beside her, "Book a ticket back, I want to go back and take a look." "Yes, madam." She was also a mother. But when it came to Lin Feng, it was a different scene. He was still in his uniform and in the resting area of the esports arena. He held on to his phone and promised, "Mom, I will take care of who normally, don't worry about that." "How do you ask me to take care of him?" "Just like usual." "Of course, we have to sleep in the same room." "What do you mean by don't go overboard?" Lin Feng's face was filled with question marks. Mother Lin didn't want to make things clear. Even if her son was magnanimous, it would be a waste if he couldn't solve this problem. The current situation was already very clear. Regardless of the competition, as long as there was a group activity that required the two of them to sleep together, his little rascal would always get a share with Yunhu. This was clearly her son's plan to get close to Hu legitimately. Mother Lin felt that she didn't know much about the situation and had to come up with a plan. "You have a competition in 2 days, you have to work hard in this area. Also, when appropriate, maintain a distance from Hu. You are affecting Hu's search for a girlfriend." "Got it." Lin Feng replied nonchalantly. In his heart, he thought, F***ck, I'm the one who's being affected. That fellow has never thought of finding a girl. But such words couldn't be said. Hence, Lin Feng could only endure it. Mother Lin continued, there's one more important thing. Go ahead. Lin Feng looked like he was ready to listen to orders. Mother Lin's voice was deep. Regardless of when or what you want to do, you can't lay a hand on who, understand? That's all, I'm hanging up. Lin Feng listened to the silence and the question marks on his face deepened. What was going on? Why did she warn him about such things? He was violent, but why would he lay a hand on who? In the past, his mother had never said such things. Why do I feel that there's something strange that I can't tell? Chapter 908. I'm going to the washroom to relieve myself. Bo Jiao stood there, her brows arched. She seemed to be asking if he was going to ask someone else to replace her. This time, Qin Mo didn't ask anyone to replace her. He lowered his gaze, his voice calm. Together. Bo Jiao, the female host, hadn't left. More accurately, the interview team hadn't left. The live stream had stopped and the cameras had been switched off. But they were still there. After listening to the conversation between the two of them, everyone present pretended to look to the side, but in fact, they had been listening all along. Brother Mo, are you really going to watch me 24 hours a day? The youngster smiled devilishly. Qin Mo swept her a glance. I have to watch you carefully since you have a criminal record. Hence, in the Almighty's eyes, she was a criminal record. Bo Jiao couldn't help but feel frustrated. At this moment, the man lifted her chin. Bo Jiao had assumed that the Almighty wouldn't do anything in front of the audience. It was obvious that the Almighty didn't care about the people around him. Can you eat until your mouth is full of biscuit crumbs? Qin Mo's voice was still magnetic and pleasant to the ears. Bo Jiao lifted her hand, wanting to wipe it off. But the moment she lifted her hand, a cool sensation was imprinted on the corner of her mouth. The corner of his mouth was imprinted with a slight coolness, with the unique minty tobacco scent of men. The touch was incomparably familiar. Bo Jiao stilled. Her dark eyes watched the handsome face that was inches away from her. They were so close that she could see the Almighty's enviable eyelashes. There was also that face that didn't require any maintenance, the noble aura, and the overly tall nose bridge. His pair of black eyes had a hint of gray in them. Bo Jiao knew it was all because of the Almighty's mixed blood. But he was so devilish. Anyone who saw him would lose their senses. Especially the Almighty's actions. Bo Jiao could clearly feel the tip of his tongue gliding past her lips. It was like a feather, giving off an indescribable feeling. Bo Jiao's ears quivered. Where did the Almighty learn this move of kissing me without even greeting me? All right. Qin Mo straightened, his fingertips still caressing the youngster's chin. He smiled. Why? Do you want me to kiss you? Wait until there's no one else. Bo Jiao felt even more depressed. On the other hand, the people from the interview group looked shocked. No one knew that when they saw that incomparably noble man bend down and gently kiss the corner of the young man's mouth, their hearts were in turmoil. That scene was indeed very beautiful. The two of them standing together were simply too compatible. But, Almighty, do you even care if there are people around? At this moment, Qin Mo turned around and glanced behind him. The people in the interview team were all in this circle. They knew what they should and shouldn't report. Whether it was for the sake of professional ethics or for the sake of their own future, they certainly wouldn't tell anyone what they saw. However, they had always thought that these relationships were just imagined by the fans online. After all, it was normal for team members to put their arms around each other's shoulders and live together. During the national competition, such special situations would indeed occur. They had followed young Master Qin for a long time, so they all knew how prideful he was. No matter how good-looking a man or woman was, they couldn't get close to him. Chapter 909. No matter what, kissing someone in public was too shocking. Just from the expression of the female host, it was obvious how much of an impact this matter had on them. Actually, even the bodyguard who had been by Qin Mo's side for a long time was shocked, but he didn't show it. But young master, what would madam and boss think if they saw you like this? It was obvious that Qin Mo was declaring his sovereignty. It was probably because of a certain sentence in the live stream room. He might as well let the people in the industry know that this wasn't a figment of his imagination. This person belonged to him. His fingers stroked that smooth chin again. Qin Mo watched the youngster's eyes, recalling the way she had sat lazily eating her biscuits. She had been so obedient and he had wanted to pinch her. It was clear that a light kiss wasn't enough for Qin Mo. He grabbed the youngster's wrist and walked towards the corridor. Bo Jiu watched his movements. "What are you doing? Aren't you going to the toilet?" Qin Mo replied nonchalantly. He brought Bo Jiu into a dead end. Bo Jiu wasn't dumb, this didn't look like a toilet. But when she glanced up, before she could say a word, she was pushed against the wall. The next moment, a fragrant kiss came. This time, Qin Mo's strength was obviously different. Reaching out, he pressed the youth's waist down and forcefully pried open those light pink lips, inhaling the sweet breath, not even letting go of the tip of the lilac tongue. Bo Jiu knew that she wasn't as skilled as the Almighty in this aspect. Her mind went blank. She couldn't tell where the numbness came from, but in that instant, her legs went limp. When the hands reached into his t-shirt, his waist trembled heavily. It turned into a puddle of water. Fortunately, after the kiss, the man caught her, moving closer to her ear. His warm breath was scorching. "You are really sensitive." Bo Jiu's ears turned red, but she didn't have the strength to move. Qin Mo seized this opportunity. He watched as the youngster's eyes turned red from the kiss. His eyes darkened, and he pressed her tighter against him. He gave her another round of deep kisses until the back of the youngster's ears turned an alluring pink. Qin Mo then stopped. He pressed the youngster into his arms, his breathing becoming slightly heavy. Bo Jiu knew better than anyone else what it looked like when the Almighty was moved. Their breaths were filled with each other's breaths. The most awkward thing was that it was seen by the same person again. Lin Feng also felt that he really should buy a lottery ticket today to try his luck. Why was it that no matter where he went, he could see Little Spade and Captain kissing? The main thing was that the two of them acted as if nothing had happened. The captain glanced sideways and glanced at him. It was obvious that he was the one who had disturbed them. Bo Jiu had been feeling gloomy, but when she saw Lin Feng's frown, she broke into a smile. She lifted her hand and placed it on his shoulder, smiling playfully at him. Lin Feng felt that it was a provocation. Wasn't it just two guys kissing? He was used to it and that was it. As a straight man, he had to suppress the discomfort in his heart in order to be manly and free. "Captain, the entire team has gathered and we are heading to the nightclub to celebrate. They asked me to get you guys. Captain, you guys. Come over once you're done kissing." With that, Lin Feng turned and walked away as though there was a terrifying beast behind him. Qin Mo retracted his gaze and placed it on the hand on his shoulder. He said slowly, "It seems like someone hasn't had enough kissing." Bo Jiu obviously knew who he was referring to. In order to prevent the Almighty from catching her again, she bent down sharply and leaped out suavely. Qin Mo glanced at his empty hand, his beautiful thin lips lifting playfully. He walked over as well. Compared to the previous time, Lin Feng's reaction was much more normal. At the very least, he didn't study Yunhu. Supreme Alliance was rich. Everyone in the esports industry knew that. Besides, Supreme Alliance's style had always been to play however they wanted once they won the competition. Besides, they had a smiling director like Feng Yi. All of them boarded the commercial car and returned to the hotel for a short break before having a sumptuous meal. Next, they took the high-speed rail back to Jiang City. It was barely 10 p.m. If they didn't go to the nightclub at this hour, it would be a waste of their hard work. Those were Lin Feng's words. Supreme Alliance went to the Jiang family's territory, the most luxurious card room near the stage. There were more than 10 bottles of champagne opened. At the start, Shui Yaoyao didn't know they were going to this nightclub. It was only after he arrived that he stopped in his tracks. This was the Jiang family's business after all. She knew a little. She was afraid she would see that person. Bo Jiu seemed to have sensed Shui Yaoyao's thoughts. She turned, her hands still stuffed into her pockets arrogantly. There was a unique gentleness in her voice. It's fine for everyone to come together unless the Jiang family doesn't want to do business. Or is there something going on between you and Jiangzhua? Shui Yaoyao was stunned. She immediately denied, no, nothing. She wasn't suited for lying. When she replied, her gaze seemed to waver. Bo Jiu was just testing the waters. She frowned when she saw Shui Yaoyao's reaction. Then she smiled. Don't be nervous, I was just saying. Let's go and celebrate. Shui Yaoyao nodded. She was still a little nervous. There were some things she didn't want Her Highness Zhou to know. From the beginning until now, she had caused enough trouble for His Highness Zhou. This kind of thing was ultimately her own decision, so it was better not to say it out loud. But there was one thing. Shui Yaoyao said in a low voice, 2 days ago, when I was at the Jiang family, I heard that Miss Wu was investigating you. She even wanted to contact Almighty Qin. Your Highness Zhou, why don't you stay in the same room with me for the rest of the competition? I'm afraid that Almighty Qin will notice something. Bo Jiu glanced over and smiled lightly. The Almighty already knows. He already knows. Shui Yaoyao stilled. What? What was going on? Bo Jiu continued, there are also some spectators that came to watch the competition. Spectators. Shui Yaoyao's eyes were filled with worry. You mean the fans? What about them? Bo Jiu paused. They promised to keep it a secret for me. But some things will be revealed sooner or later. I still have to deal with Fu Zhongyi. Once I'm done with him. Bo Jiu paused. She glanced up and smiled. Yaoyao, it seems like this free brother of yours has many female friends. She was changing the topic. In the past, Shui Yaoyao's first reaction would be to look at the man surrounded by beauties. But this time, Shui Yaoyao could hear the hidden meaning behind Her Highness Zhou's words. What would happen after she dealt with Fu Zhongyi? What was she going to do? Shui Yaoyao wasn't stupid. She understood the meaning behind her words. She had always felt that Her Highness Zhou was different from the people around her. She didn't look like an ordinary high school student. She didn't look like one at all. But even if she didn't look like one, it didn't change the fact that she was a high school student. Because the Supreme Alliance members hadn't entered. Just then, Qin Mo's phone rang. It was a school director on the phone. The headmaster replied tactfully, I guess that young Master Qin should have reached Jiang City after the competition. That's why I called to ask about your brother. In the second half of the second semester of Year 2, the school will require all students to stay on campus. Student Fu Jiu hasn't completed the procedure yet. Required to stay on campus. Qin Mo frowned. In the male dormitory. The headmaster replied immediately, "That's right. You lived there before and should know that the dormitory conditions in our school aren't bad. Even though it's 6 people per room, there's plenty of space." Chin Mo's voice was calm. It isn't convenient for him to stay on campus. The headmaster opened his mouth. But in the second half of the semester, the pressure from studying will increase. If he doesn't stay on campus, the night self-study session, I'll tutor him personally. Chin Mo's voice didn't change. He won't do too badly. As for the night self-study session, when will it start? I'll send him there and let him come back after class. Since young Master Chin had already said that, he couldn't find anything else to insist on. After all, young Master Chin was considered half a parent. He had even attended the parent-teacher conference previously. The headmaster hung up the phone silently. He couldn't understand why young Master Chin didn't allow student Fujio to stay on campus. He was clearly a student who stayed on campus in the past. Chin Mo hung up the phone as well. He glanced at the youngster who was looking at him and arched a brow. Bojio heard someone mention her name over the phone. Her thin lips curved upwards. She was too handsome. Standing in the middle of the nightclub, there were already many girls who were looking back. Chin Mo took in all the admiring gazes and scoffed in his heart. With such an alluring appearance, of course he couldn't put her in the male dormitory where they lived together. A certain someone was only suitable to stay by his side and watch him. That was indeed the case. However, the youngster seemed to be born for this kind of place. Her entire being blended into the darkness. In order to prevent any negative effects, the Supreme Alliance members had already changed their team uniforms to their private uniforms when they were in the hotel. At this moment, Bojio was wearing a pair of white vintage jeans and a pure black t-shirt with a black hairpin on her head. Not only did she not look feminine, but she gave off an evil vibe. Needless to say, when someone glanced over, the youngster held the wine glass and lifted her lips into a smile. The curve at the corner of her lips pierced straight into the heart. Stay on campus. Even if she hadn't heard the entire conversation, Bojio caught onto the key point. In her current situation, it would be easier for her to conceal herself if she lived in the school. That was because the campus network there could be shared after a skillful connection. Chapter 9-10. With that in mind, the youngster lowered her lids and drank a glass of wine. She was prepared to find a time to have a good chat with a certain director. After all, she was still the one making the decisions on whether to stay on campus or not. Fortunately, this group of people was too eye-catching, all of them were good-looking. Jiang Zhua, who was sitting at the far end, noticed them immediately. It was obvious that Feng Yi and the others didn't inform them beforehand. When he saw the familiar figure sitting behind them, Jiang Zhua casually pulled out a bottle of wine from the ice bucket and strolled over to their card bag. "Why didn't you tell me you were coming?" This sentence was directed at Chin Mo. But he sat on Yao Yao's right. Shui Yao Yao, who had just relaxed, immediately tensed up, even the wine glass in her hand paused for a moment. Fortunately, Jiang Zhua didn't look at her. It seemed like he was just here to greet Almighty Chin. Chin Mo glanced over. Team gathering. What he meant was that it was different from other times, there wasn't much preparation. Jiang Zhua chuckled lightly, the aura of a rich young master. "It seems like you guys won, the next match will be against Xiangnan, MMH." Even though there wasn't much change in his voice, it was obvious that he was different in front of Jiang Zhua compared to others. The two of them were brothers who came from the same courtyard, so they chatted casually. Shui Yao Yao saw that Jiang Zhua didn't have any intention of leaving and her breathing was a little tight. Because of the limited sofa space in the card bag, they were so close that they could smell each other's breath. In addition, his empty hand was placed on her long legs, so intimate. Shui Yaoyao's back stiffened, instinctively avoiding his action. What was he doing? Jiang Zuo's gaze turned towards her, extremely dark, as though he was brewing something. Shui Yaoyao knew what he meant. He was reminding her that time was up. Because it was Thursday. They had agreed on the day they would go to bed. Shui Yaoyao tightened her grip on the wine bottle. That was the reason why she didn't want to come back. Wasn't it a little amusing? He didn't have any feelings for her, but he wouldn't let her off in this aspect. But he also said that he was doing this to her as a punishment. As for what the punishment was, it was obvious. He hated her. Even now, he still hated her family for ruining his original life. Just as he said, in his eyes, whether it was her or her mother, they flattered his father just for the Jiang family's money. In some aspects, Jiang Zuo wasn't wrong. His mother married Uncle Jiang because she liked him a little, but most of the reason was that the Shui family was inseparable from the Jiang family. As his mother said, Uncle Jiang could send his younger brother to a good middle school, which was very important to his mother. Hence, even though Jiang Zuo wasn't easy to get along with, her mother didn't say anything and tolerated everything. Shui Yaoyao thought it was better this way since it could lessen some of her guilt. But she saw him with another woman just now. She wanted to confirm something because she didn't want to ruin someone's relationship without knowing it. Chapter 9-11. Bo Jiu was still thinking about the dormitory and didn't pay much attention to the interaction between Shui Yaoyao and Jiang Zuo. But when she heard Shui Yaoyao's words, she asked gently, "Do you need me to go with you? The nightclub isn't safe sometimes." "It's fine, I can go alone." Shui Yaoyao smiled, her heart softening as she watched the youngster. Even her eyes were brighter than before. Jiang Zuo's eyes dimmed when he saw this. He didn't say anything, he continued to drink as though he hadn't heard their conversation. He tilted his head back and drank the wine in his hand, turning his leg to let Shui Yaoyao out. After about a minute, he stood up and raised his glass towards Qin Mo. "I have a friend over there, you guys can drink first." Qin Mo glanced at Jiang Zuo. He was already aware of some things but he didn't like to interfere in other people's relationships. Especially since he knew Jiang Zuo well, he only acknowledged with a faint mmh and didn't say anything else. At this moment, Shui Yaoyao was standing at the corridor. She wasn't dressed like the other girls in the nightclub, she was dressed very conservatively. It was just that she, who had lost weight, was especially fair. Her eyes were also a lot bigger. When she tied her hair up, her neck would always look very white and slender from the back. It made people want to know what she looked like from the front. There was a man passing by, dressed rather maturely. When he saw Shui Yaoyao, his eyes lit up. Then, he walked over and lowered his voice. His face was chiseled and tough. "Alone?" The nightclub wasn't well lit. Shui Yaoyao turned when she heard the voice. The man's gaze deepened. "So it's you." Shui Yaoyao didn't recognize the person in front of her, her eyes filled with confusion. "You are." "I know Boss Feng." The man had a company under him. He was in the network integration business and wasn't unfamiliar with esports. Of course, it wasn't the photos that made him remember Shui Yaoyao. It was her personal story. Shui Yaoyao was just another selling point for a professional sports player's publicity. She was like most ordinary girls, but she had leaped into the limelight of a professional sports player. In addition, she used to be very mellow, and her current appearance was undoubtedly a very good story template. However, at that time, when the man looked at the information, he felt that if all the girls in this world were as hardworking as her, then the results of some things might be different. The man smiled. Originally, he had intended to play around, but now, there was a hint of sincerity. "All right, let's not talk about me. Why are you here alone?" The nightclub is not a safe place. Shui Yao Yao wanted to say something. A familiar deep voice came from behind. Boss Ling, you're in a good mood. I didn't know you knew my friend. Shui Yao Yao didn't need to look to know who that voice belonged to. It was probably because she did not keep to the time agreement that the person's voice carried a trace of coldness, as if it was stained with a heavy layer of ice. Director Zhang's friend. The man raised his eyebrows and chuckled. It doesn't look like it. Jiang Zhua had never been like this before. Even though his lips were curved, there wasn't a smile in his eyes. What doesn't seem right? Director Zhang's friends are all. The man paused before continuing. She doesn't seem to belong to that type. Jiang Zhua glanced at Shui Yao Yao, probably because of the distance, his voice became colder. Director Ling, don't you know that some people can't be judged by their appearance? This sentence obviously had another meaning. The man frowned, wanting to speak up for Shui Yao Yao. But Jiang Zhua pulled her over, his left hand holding onto Shui Yao Yao's wrist. There wasn't a hint of awkwardness on his face, instead, he had a warlord's child smile. It was devilish. I have some private matters to discuss with her, please help yourself, Director Ling. Before the man could say anything, Jiang Zhua had already dragged her to the corridor at the side. The nightclub's bodyguards automatically stood out, blocking the entrance. After all, this was Jiang Zhua's place. There were some special places prepared for him. The corridor was paved with red carpet, and at the end was a luxurious private room. That private room was rarely visited, specially provided for Jiang Zhua to rest. Hence, there weren't many people around, except for a few high-ranking officials and children who came to have fun. Even if they saw Jiang Zhua dragging someone, they would think it was a beauty. The ambiguous expression on their faces clear. Hey, young Master Jiang seems to have changed his taste today. Who is this for young Master Jiang to bring her here personally? A drunk youngster placed his arm over a girl's shoulder, leaning over to see what Shui Yao Yao looked like. Jiang Zhua blocked him, looking playful. What's so good about a girl? Go do what you have to do, I have something to do here. What can you do at this hour? The youngster laughed even more happily. All right, I understand. I won't disturb young Master Jiang and this lady, have fun. All right, get lost. Jiang Zhua was always like this in front of others, his child aura mixed with the aura of a gangster. Shui Yao Yao heard his words and roughly knew what kind of person he thought she was. Hence, she didn't retort. Anyway, no one could see her from where she was standing. It was a day like today. Shui Yao Yao just hoped that no one would recognize her, as long as she didn't embarrass Supreme Alliance. Jiang Zhua probably didn't want others to know that they were together, otherwise, he wouldn't have ignored her and said those words. Come to think of it, his attitude towards her had never changed. He probably hated her, but at that time, he just felt that there was no need to be calculative with a girl like her, who was a toad trying to eat swan meat. After all, she hadn't shown herself in front of him yet. Later, when the conflict erupted, she understood his hatred. He had told her that the thing he was most unhappy about was that Uncle Jiang had forgotten about his mother. At that time, the two of them were keeping a secret, and he had always told her anything he wanted to say. He even said that he could only say all his unhappiness in front of a ball like her. No one would have expected that her mother would become the woman Uncle Jiang wanted to marry. To him, regardless of whether it was her or her mother, they were probably no different from the gold diggers outside. Ever since that day, the way he looked at her was as cold as ice, as though it could pierce through a person's bones, just like now. After entering the luxurious room, Jiang Zhua exerted force with his wrist, pressing the person in front of him into the sofa. Then he bent down and lowered his body, his voice ringing in Shui Yao Yao's ears. I really underestimated your ability to recognize people. Why? Now that young Master Fu isn't important to you, you're starting to change him. Shui Yao Yao clenched her fists. This has nothing to do with His Highness Zhou. Looking at Shui Yao Yao's expression, Jiang Zuo's gaze turned cold. You treasure him so much. Heh, what do you think he would think if he knew what you are like? Shui Yao Yao's gaze met Jiang Zuo's, and there was no room for resistance. I have always thought that this contract is between the two of us. When we were together, we agreed to keep it a secret. Otherwise, I wouldn't have agreed to the contract. Yes, everything you said is right. Jiang Zuo sneered, his fingers pinching Shui Yao Yao's chin. He bit down on her lips, his voice cold. But don't forget who begged me to agree to this contract. Shui Yao Yao knew that she had no right to refute his words. If that young Master Fu knew that you have done so much for him, would he be touched, or would he be like me and feel that you are pestering him? Jiang Zuo's fingers slid down her chin, into her collar. It's a pity that no matter who you pester, you won't pester him to the end. The coldness from her collarbone made Shui Yao Yao shudder. Her fingers tightened naturally, her brows furrowed. Jiang Zuo didn't like her expression. It was as though she was tolerating something and hadn't really accepted him. His gaze turned even colder. Why? You aren't even willing for me to touch you now. Shui Yao Yao knew that if she wasn't willing, Jiang Zuo wouldn't take another step forward. Just like now, he had already stopped. Even though his breath still lingered on her lips and nose, at least his hand that was about to cover her had stopped. This gave Shui Yao Yao a chance to talk rationally. I just saw you with a very beautiful person. This was what she wanted to say this time. What was unbelievable was that Jiang Zuo seemed to have recovered a little. His lips curved upwards, his beautiful eyes looking at her. It wasn't clear whether it was playful or sarcastic. Jealous? Only then did Shui Yao Yao realize that he had misunderstood something. She immediately explained, no, that's not what I meant. What I meant was, just like what we said in the contract, if you have someone you like, tell me and we'll end this relationship. Otherwise, you'll hurt a third person. Plus, if you have someone you like, you'll probably hate doing this with me, right? For some reason, his side profile suddenly turned cold. You don't have to remind me about such things. Just like what you said, if I have someone I like, I definitely won't want to touch you again. I will inform you when the time comes. Shui Yao Yao's voice faded, and she smiled as though a huge burden had been lifted off her shoulders. She looked as though she had heaved a sigh of relief. Jiang Zuo didn't seem to have the slightest interest. He retracted his hand and lit a cigarette, holding it between his fingers. Aren't you a little too self-conscious? Chapter 9:12. How do you think I feel about you? Jiang Zuo glanced over, the color in his eyes darkening. I just feel indignant, don't misunderstand your position. If it had been in the past, Shui Yao Yao would have been heartbroken. But now that she knew the truth, she said, I've never misunderstood anything. I'm just reminding you because if something happens, it won't be good for either of us. Similarly, I won't have any illusions about you anymore. I've said what I should have said that day. Actually, thinking about it, it's quite funny that we have such a contract, isn't it? I earned quite a bit from the competition this time. If you have any thoughts, we can use other methods to solve some problems. Jiang Zuo laughed, reaching out to extinguish the cigarette in the ashtray, the coldness at the corner of his lips obvious. That's right, I forgot that you're already a small god in the esports world. Why? After gaining fame, you feel that your past is too unbearable and you want to get rid of it. Jiang Zuo leaned over, his breath hitting the back of Shui Yao Yao's ears. The game has already begun, as for when it ends, it's up to me, not you. With that, Jiang Zuo stood up, walking out of the room. The aura emanating from his back made some of the staff in the nightclub afraid to take a step forward. Anyone could tell that young Master Jiang wasn't in a good mood, which was why he came to the nightclub to drink. Now, it seemed even worse than before. He had clearly brought a girl in. How did he end up like this? Shui Yaoyao glanced at the door that had been slammed shut, the sound still echoing. She roughly knew what Jiang Zuo was thinking. He had always been a leader. Of course, he wouldn't allow anyone to end what he wanted to do. It probably had to do with his pride. Shui Yaoyao stood up, walking out. When the nightclub staff's gaze landed on her collar, she seemed to realize something. She blushed, lowering her head to tidy her clothes before walking towards the Supreme Alliance card bag. She had thought that if he left just like that, the agreement would be cancelled. What Shui Yaoyao hadn't expected was that in less than 2 minutes, she received a message from Jiang Zuo just as she walked down the corridor. The content was for her to greet the people from Supreme Alliance. Someone would pick her up and they would meet at the usual place. She had been going there every Thursday since they had agreed to meet at the old place. That was Jiang Zuo's own house, probably no one knew he had such a house. Some people said that he often kept beauties in there. However, she reckoned that if those people knew that she was also a member of the Fragrance of Heaven and Earth, they would definitely be surprised. After all, among the people he knew, her appearance was indeed very ordinary. Shui Yaoyao had always been self-aware. Especially in this aspect. Even more so. She's on Thursday. He just didn't know what day it was for the others. Even though he had promised her that he would only do it with her when they were together. But today's scene made Shui Yaoyao feel like she didn't understand Jiang Zuo at all. The person she used to know was like her best memory. When it stopped at that moment, she would always mistake it for warmth. Chapter 9:13. Someone as warm as a brother would only exist when nothing had happened. When it happened, she also truly understood his thoughts and the gap between the two of them. Feelings couldn't be forced. She sincerely hoped that they could be clear that she wasn't someone who clung to anyone. Shui Yaoyao didn't reply to the message. Today was an important day for everyone. She didn't want to be absent from Supreme Alliance's victory celebration. She believed that he would find someone to replace her. But Supreme Alliance was irreplaceable to her. Moreover, Highness Zhou was so smart, it was probably because she didn't reply. Very quickly, the next day's WeChat came. Shui Yaoyao glanced at it and sent a few words over. Find someone else today. After the National League, I will abide by our agreement. Find someone else. When Jiang Zuo saw the 3 words, his eyes turned extremely cold. What kind of person did she think he was? Or was it because she didn't care anymore and it had nothing to do with her who he was with? Jiang Zuo sat in the back seat of the extended black car. The interior of such a luxurious car was very grand. Beside him was a cigarette lighter and a wine glass holder. He tightened his grip on the phone. That man from the Fu family was really very important to her. The driver could clearly see his young master's unhappy expression, but he didn't dare to say anything. He watched as the person threw the phone in his hand to the side and disappeared into the night. Not going there today, back to the courtyard. Yes, young master. Even though the driver was shocked, he didn't show it. But his young master had said that he was going to pick up second miss today. Now it seemed like they weren't on good terms again. Outside the car window, the night continued. The unique liveliness of a nightclub hadn't subsided at all. It was the reverberation music that could make people high. The DJ wore black headphones and played with one hand while the other led the rhythm. It was like a sleepless night that made people excited. But it was such a night that things happened easily. There were probably many benefits to being good-looking. For example, he didn't know how many waves of girls had come over to buy the youngster a drink. Chin Mo was even sent a huge fruit platter. Perhaps it was because Jiang Suo wasn't the one serving Chin Mo this time. He didn't go to the private room along the corridor. Instead, he sat at the two sides of the stage, which was why people thought he was just here to play. After all, Chin Mo was wearing his private clothes. He had shed the business suit and the team battle uniform. All that was left was his original color. He was noble with a hint of indifference. It was the kind of temperament that attracted girls. Even the curve of his chin made people want to stare at him again and again. At this time, Coco always sighed. They were both university students, but why was there such a huge difference between him and Captain? In fact, even if they were all esports almighties, only Coco had appeared more often. Hence, Coco was wearing a black mask and hugging a bottle of wine to get drunk. He was frustrated that he couldn't show off his beautiful face. Speaking of which, it was probably because of his cold aura that not many people got close to him. On the other hand, Bojio was surrounded by 3 to 4 girls, all of them blushing as they chatted with her. This was what Shui Yao Yao saw when she came back. Bojio smiled and said to the girls, "My friend is back, please give up your seat." Even if the girls had other thoughts, they could only leave since she had already said that. But before they could take a step, it happened. Not far away, a man with a thick gold chain and a handbag on his arm walked over aggressively. Behind him were 3 or 4 people who looked like underlings. He swept a glance at one of the girls and pulled her back. He raised his chin and glanced at the silver-haired youngster in front of him. "Do you know who she is? How can you drink her wine so casually?" Lin Feng was tired of looking at the girls and wanted to talk to Little Spade about brotherly matters. The so-called brotherly matters were probably to ask the gays what they were thinking. Why didn't they like soft girls? Why did they have to like guys who were as hard as them? He hadn't expected that before he could put on a serious expression, someone had come to ruin his plans. The naive Lin Feng's definition of a good thing was a little unusual. But that didn't affect his desire to beat them up. The man with the gold chain was still pretending to be cultured. "Look at your looks, you haven't been around much. How are you going to settle the score for flirting with someone's girlfriend? Shouldn't you talk about it?" Bojio swirled the wine glass, looking like a nocturnal prince. She laughed. "What do you want to talk about? I'm not an unreasonable person who dares to drink anyone's wine, right?" The man with the gold chain glanced over. Immediately, someone passed a bottle of wine over. It was white and had a high purity. "Since you like to drink so much, finish the whole bottle in front of me." The man with the gold chain sounded calm, his entire aura imposing. Usually, the students would have given in when they saw him like this. A bunch of people who came from nowhere were acting so high profile just because they were handsome. Weren't they asking for a beating? The golden-chained man wanted to teach them a lesson and let them know how high the heavens were and how deep the earth was. But the man didn't expect the youngster to not show any signs of fear. Instead, she looked at him and lifted her lips. "What if I say I don't want to drink?" The gold-chained man's eyes darkened, and he looked very dangerous. Looks like some people just want to suffer before they realize how ridiculous their words are. With that, he glanced to his left and right. The two of them clenched their fists, rushing towards her with a murderous aura. But before they could even get close to the young man, their feet hit the ground, and they fell face first onto the ground. It was Chin Mo. He was still holding onto the wine glass, but his long legs were stretched out. The man with the gold chain was infuriated when he saw the situation. "Look, this bunch of people refused a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and attack," the man with the gold chain ordered. The people around him pounced towards the youngster like a swarm of bees. They were obviously relying on their numbers and familiarity with the place to get rid of someone. The man with the gold chain was still waiting for the youngster to beg for mercy. Just then, the youngster in front of him bent over and kicked beautifully. While she dodged the man's attack, she reached out and pulled him over forcefully. The youngster's movements were swift, so swift that the man with the gold chain couldn't retaliate in time. The others froze. After their legs were kicked by the youngster, they realized one thing: these people weren't to be trifled with. Bojo didn't mind. Since things were smashed during the fight, he would let the troublemaker pay for it. With that in mind, the youngster grabbed onto the gold-chained man who was about to retreat. Her actions were so cool that Lin Feng, who was seated at the side, wasn't of any use. She watched as the rest of the men were pushed down and there was only one left. Bojo exerted strength in her wrist. She grabbed onto his collar with one hand and lifted him up. "Do you still want me to finish the whole bottle? Do you know who I am? Do you know whose place this is?" The man with the gold chain was used to being arrogant and had no intention of holding back. "How dare you fight here? Where do you think this is? Where do you think you can come and go as you please? Look at my relationship with Jiangzhua. How dare you challenge me?" That explained why the man with the gold chain was so fearless. It was because of their relationship. But if he was really close to young Master Jiang, how could he not know the Almighty? It was highly possible that the man with the gold chain was just a friend of young Master Jiang. He was flaunting his relationship with Jiangzhua in front of the Almighty. Bojo treated it as a joke. The man with the gold chain didn't change his attitude towards them. Especially the person who had been sitting in the innermost corner, he lifted the corners of his lips as though he was mocking him. The man with the gold chain couldn't tolerate it. When he saw the waiters and bodyguards, even the manager was alerted and ran over. Instantly, he gained confidence. In reality, she had tried her best to reduce the area of influence during the fight. However, the big golden chain did not seem to think that it was time to reduce the area of influence. Instead, his words made many people look in his direction. After the manager heard the news, he hurriedly ran to the card box. The gold-chained man pulled him over. "Manager Li, look. These young people like to cause trouble. People like them should be chased out. It's good that you're here to teach them a lesson." After saying that, the golden-chained man glanced at the group of people again. It was as if he was saying, "Did you see that? If I want you to leave, it's just a matter of saying a few words." Regardless of whether it was Bojo or Shui Yaoyao, they could all read the meaning behind his gaze. "Actually, it doesn't matter if Manager Li doesn't come. I can handle these people myself." Intentionally or unintentionally, the man flaunted his connections. "But I'm really thankful that you came all the way here just for me." However, the gold-chained man didn't expect Manager Li to walk past him and ask Qin Mo, "Young Master Qin, do you need me to change your seat? Or what do you want to do?" Before Boss Jiang left, he instructed us to take good care of your card box. "I just left for a short while, I didn't expect this to happen. Young Master Qin." The moment Manager Li said that, the golden-chained man realized that he had done something stupid. He had never expected that young Master Qin would be sitting there. Wasn't he usually in a private room? Why was he so unlucky today? He had bumped into him sitting outside. Moreover, when he thought about what he had done and said to them, the golden-chained man's face turned red and white. It was embarrassing enough that he had mistakenly thought that Manager Li had come specially for him. Now that he thought about it, he had even flaunted his relationship with young Master Jiang in front of young Master Qin. At this moment, the golden-chained man wanted to find a hole to hide in. While his heart was pounding, there was also an indescribable sense of awkwardness. The girls were still standing at the side. When they heard Manager Li call Qin Mo, young Master Qin, they realized something and looked over with a different gaze. Qin Mo rarely came to this kind of place. Even if he did, he would order a private room. It was rare for him to sit outside like this. Some of them had just delivered fruit platters here, and many rich people had said that they had their eyes on someone in this group. Now, it seemed that none of them were people that they could get close to. As for Chin Mo, he lifted his lids and glanced at the man in the gold chain. His voice was calm and there was an indescribable indifference in it. There is one thing you are mistaken about. In the future, look after your girlfriend well. Don't give her alcohol so casually. Not everyone will drink the alcohol she gives. If you can't look after your own woman well, you will vent your anger on others who are more outstanding than you. Boss Hong, do you think you are a man? Boss Hong was a golden-chained man. His words were a slap in the face. Boss Hong was shocked that this young Master Chin knew him. Apart from the shock, he thought about why everyone said that young Master Chin wasn't someone to be trifled with. That one sentence had shaped his behavior for the day. It sounded a little perverted. Moreover, this matter was caused by this little girlfriend of his who was not well behaved. Chin Mo was just short of saying that it was his girlfriend's problem and it had nothing to do with others. Boss Hong turned his head and saw that many people were looking at him. He had really lost all his face. This was a place he frequented, which was why he knew Jiangzhua. In some aspects, there was no distinction between the two sides. But because of this, when the young master of the Qin family said that, not only had he been cuckolded, but he was also narrow-minded and narrow-minded. F***ck, we're all cultured people like that. It didn't sound like much, but when he thought about it, it was more lethal than dealing with him directly. This young Master Qin was really too. Boss Hong wasn't well educated and couldn't find the right words to describe him. Bo Jiu shook her head regretfully. In terms of shamelessness, she really couldn't compare to the Almighty. When he saw the youngster shaking her head, Chin Mo arched a brow. His voice was calm. Come over. It was obvious who he was talking to. Boss Hong wouldn't foolishly stay there to be a target. After apologizing, he quickly left, mainly because he was afraid that young Master Qin would say something else. Originally, he didn't want to do anything, he just wanted to scare them, but who knew that he would be the one being scared. Chapter 9:14. Bo Jiu arched a brow. She walked over. Chin Mo didn't hold back at all. He sat there and pulled her over. His thin lips were extremely close to her nose, just a few tenths of an inch away. Their posture instantly attracted a group of people's attention. Especially when the youngster leaned forward, the sharp edges of his face were covered with tiny fur. It was clean and fair, carrying an indescribable handsomeness. The two of them were in such a position, it was too much like the prelude to a kiss. It's too easy to attract attention. Bo Jiu. She really didn't know what to say. After all, the Almighty was the best at attracting attention. The two of them were already handsome. Now, they were displayed in such a suggestive manner in front of everyone. Some of the beauties who had wanted to buy the youngster a drink stopped in their tracks. There were also some who had hoped for the appearance of the legendary young Master Qin. Now that he had finally appeared, they all froze on the spot with their mouths agape and tongue-tied. For a moment, everyone was looking at the card holder in the center. Their mouths were wide open, filled with indescribable shock. They really didn't think that the two of them would have that kind of relationship. After all, both of them were very handsome. The aura they exuded was rare as well. If these two people were indeed abnormal in that aspect, it was really a waste of heavenly gifts. Could it be that they were thinking too much? Perhaps the two of them were just brothers, but which good brother would use such a posture to talk? The girls seemed to hear the sound of their hearts breaking. There were some who didn't give up. They held on to their wine bottles and bit their lips, continuing to look around. Chi Nemo exerted force, bringing the youngster's face closer to him. I don't like to fight. It's tiring to deal with another boss Hong. Chi Mo's voice was calm. It didn't seem like there was any problem at all. But who would believe his words? Even if there were 10 more boss Hong, they would still have to kneel in front of their captain. The captain had always been expressionless when it came to dealing with people. Just those few words just now had already revealed this characteristic of his. Now, he actually said it was tiring to deal with him. Such an excuse. What exactly was he trying to do? Just when the Supreme Alliance members were feeling puzzled, Chi Nemo used force and pressed the youngster down beside him. Sit here, in case your face attracts more nobodies. Bojo, that seat was really in the innermost area. She was almost in the same group as Coco. There was no exposure at all. But it didn't matter where she sat. The only difference was that the Almighty's legs were tightly pressed against hers. She didn't know if it was intentional or not. Seeing the youngster sit beside Chi Nemo, the onlookers gave up completely. It wasn't that they were thinking too much, it was the truth. It was no wonder that no matter how beautiful the girl was, the young man didn't drink at all. Moreover, young Master Qin had always been cold and indifferent to everyone. Once a woman clung to him and didn't give up, that woman would be rejected the next day. It was the same for all of them. In the past, they always thought it was because of young Master Qin's personality, but now it seemed like it was because young Master Qin liked boys. Such a thing was definitely explosive, but no one dared to expose it. But someone like young Master Qin was gay. It wasn't just sad, some people's dreams of being rich were shattered. There were many people who had woken up from their dreams, including the girls who wanted to continue treating Bojo. After all, the youngster seemed like the one being kept, the toasts lessened instantly. Finally, there weren't as many people using the excuse of toasting to look at Bojo. But at this moment, no one noticed. Every time Bojo moved, Chi Nemo would move closer. On the third time, the Almighty tilted his head, his voice calm. Why are you so restless? Do you want to sit on my lap? Bojo, the Almighty sounded as though she was the one taking advantage of him. Mainly, the Almighty hadn't spoken loudly, but it was clear enough for the surrounding people to hear. Everyone quietened down, lifting their heads to drink silently. Their gazes drifted over, especially Lin Feng. These two really didn't know how to restrain themselves, especially Little Spade. Bojo didn't have to guess. Once she saw Lin Feng's gaze, she knew he had misunderstood something. After all, she was the aggressor in everyone's eyes. If she took the initiative, it wouldn't be wrong. But the Almighty's tricks. Bojo glanced up at Chi Nemo. It was really shameless. Chi Nemo allowed the youngster to size him up. There wasn't any hint of discomfort on his face. He was still indifferent and noble. The more he looked, the more she took the initiative. In the end, Bojo gave up. The Almighty was so handsome. In terms of looks, he was indeed able to take the initiative, regardless of gender. So be it if his long legs were pressed against hers, it wasn't as though they hadn't done more intimate positions before. She could touch his thighs and make the crime of taking advantage of him a reality. Since she was already the one taking advantage, it would be a waste not to touch him. After thinking it through, the youngster's expression became more mischievous. She placed her left arm on the sofa behind her, her right hand naturally placed on his long and slender leg. Speaking of which, it did seem like a domineering CEO teasing his secretary. It wasn't bad for her. Especially when her hand was placed on the Almighty's thigh, she could clearly feel his body freeze for a moment. Bojo had always been more than happy to be able to influence his actions. She still remembered the time when she had first met the Almighty. She had only needed to blow into his ear and he would go berserk, wanting to stuff her into a bucket like trash. It was rare to see an almighty like this. Anyone could tell that the youngster was a hedonistic son, the smile on her face obvious. Who knew what she was up to? The moment she placed her hand on his thigh, Chin Mo's hand paused. When he saw that she had no intention of moving her hand away, his gaze deepened. There wasn't any change in the contours of his face, it was still chiseled. However, his eyes seemed to be penetrated by something, they were extremely deep. A certain someone was undoubtedly plucking the hair off a tiger's head, but she didn't seem to be aware of it. She smiled at him. Brother Mo's tofu isn't bad. The youngster's hand slid down the side of his thigh. Chin Mo's eyes dimmed. He put down the wine glass in his hand, leaned closer to the person, and held her wrist with his other hand. Bojo assumed that the Almighty wanted her to move her hand away. Unexpectedly, he lowered his voice, his breath landing beside her ear. He tilted his handsome face, his pale lips pressing against the hair behind her ear. The minty tobacco scent was extremely obvious. You aren't touching the right place, go further down, a little towards the center. A little further down and in the middle. Bojo lowered her eyes. She glanced at the man who was about to lift his head due to her actions. She was extremely familiar with the feeling of her blood slowly swelling up. That thing had tormented her for an entire night. Most importantly, she had only taken a glance at it, but it seemed to have grown a little bigger. Bojo couldn't help wanting to retreat, but the Almighty held on to her wrist. When she glanced up, she saw his eyes that were as deep as the night sea and that face that was incomparably elegant no matter where she looked at it. Logically speaking, there would definitely be people noticing them when they were so close to each other. Indeed, there would be people noticing, but in a noisy nightclub, it wasn't strange for them to be so close to each other. Moreover, Lin Feng was still thinking about how to win against Yunhu, hence, he used all his backup plans. He got Coco to stare at Yunhu's spot and give him hints. Uncle Ian had drunk quite a lot and was smoking. Shui Yaoyao wasn't paying attention, she swiped open her phone screen and waited for it to dim. Therefore, no one noticed the movements of these two people. In addition, the two of them were indeed sitting very close to each other. No matter how intimate they were, it wouldn't make people feel anything. On the contrary, just looking at the two of them sitting together and talking with their faces close to each other's ears was too pleasing to the eye. The tips of her ears turned red, her palms burning hot, especially when he held onto her hand and moved it downwards. It didn't feel like she was teasing him, instead, it felt like she was being teased. Why? You were touching me with all your might just now, but now you don't dare to. Chin Mo's voice was a little hoarse as though he was warning her. How are you going to take responsibility if you're done touching me? Bojo knew that if this continued, she would be the one in danger. Fortunately, this wasn't the same as in the car or on the bed. She smiled faintly and stood up. I'm going to get a plate of dried fruits, you guys can continue. Bojo had always been skilled. If she wasn't trapped, it wouldn't be difficult for her to escape from the Almighty's strong aura. The Supreme Alliance members didn't pay attention to this side, they were all immersed in the game of dice rolling. When Lin Feng heard that she was going to get a plate of dried fruits, he glanced up and said, another bucket of ice. All right. Bojo didn't stay any longer, she had wanted to escape for a while. Chin Mo watched as the figure walked further and further away. He raised his eyebrows and frowned heavily. He had finished the wine in his hand but he couldn't get up. He could only wait for the heat to dissipate. The feeling of that person's fingers still lingered on his long legs. It was too sweet. Chin Mo's eyes darkened. He reached out and tugged his collar open, pressing the loose strands of hair to the back of his head. In this state, he was even more alluring and seductive than usual. Especially when he moved, it was as though he was a blooming red spider lily, elegant with an indescribable beauty, attracting the attention of everyone in the nightclub. Especially the girls, they couldn't help but glance over. But when they thought about the interaction between young Master Qin and the youngster, they could only sigh internally. Why did handsome men end up with other men? Previously, they would still approach him without fear of death, but now that they saw him like this, they really didn't have any thoughts of being extraordinary anymore. Even if that person was exuding a charm that made people want to look at him again and again, they couldn't go any further. It was such a pity that they couldn't touch him. Just as the beauties were feeling disappointed, Bojo had already gotten the dried fruit platter. But when she brushed past a girl, she suddenly stopped. It wasn't for any other reason, it was because the girl didn't know what was going on, but her legs went soft, and she almost fell. Bojo went over to support her instinctively. But when she touched the girl's arm, her heart froze. Why was she so skinny? That was Bojo's first reaction. But before she could react, her fingers were trembling. The girl seemed to be enduring something, her fingers trembling slightly. Bojo thought something was wrong with her. She tilted her head and asked, "Are you feeling unwell?" Washroom. The girl finally raised her head. Her looks were not bad. It was probably because her makeup was messed up that she looked a little like a ghost. Bojo observed her expression. The washroom isn't in this direction. Washroom, I need to go to the washroom. As the girl spoke, she seemed to be inhaling and exhaling. Her expression became very indescribable. Even her face was much paler than before, as if a serious illness was about to act up. But Bojo knew it wasn't a serious illness, it was a state that happened when a drug addict wanted to take drugs. But she never expected someone so young to be involved in drugs on the mainland. After all, the girl seemed to be around her age and was just a high school student. Bojo frowned, reaching out to pull the girl's wrist over, pulling the sleeves of the long dress she was wearing. Sure enough, in the armpit, there were still remnants of the tiny needle and the greenish skin. This proved that she wasn't a newbie. Bojo's eyes widened, this was the first time there was a different color in them. She was well aware of the law and order in the mainland. Some places were extremely strict with drugs, especially in Jiang City. Besides, based on Jiang's personality, even if he opened a nightclub, he wouldn't allow his subordinates to touch such things. After all, he was a military officer. Coupled with his background and his relationship with the Almighty, all of these made this nightclub cleaner than any other nightclub in the city. If there was anything that was not clean, it would be the interactions between the officials. But those had nothing to do with drugs. More importantly, this girl didn't seem like someone who would be addicted to drugs. After all, no matter from the way she dressed, she belonged to the type of obedient girl. Chapter 9:15. Bojo could feel the grip on her wrist getting harder and harder to control. The girl seemed to be enraged, shouting at her darkly, Where's the washroom? Give it to me, I know it's there, give it to me." Usually, when a drug addict acted up, they would be extremely strong. They would be like a lunatic that no one could control. This girl wasn't an exception. Since she couldn't find the answer she was looking for, she pushed Bojo into a pile of alcohol. It was called a pile of alcohol because there was a triangular shape made of alcohol bottles. It was originally a luxurious display. It was easy to imagine how big of a commotion would be caused by such a collision. Most of the staff in the nightclub looked over. Fortunately, Bojo's reflexes were fast. When the bottle fell, she wasn't pushed down. Otherwise, her right hand would have been cut by the broken bottle. Almost immediately, the nearest nightclub staff ran over. Bojo was stopped by them. Hence, she missed the opportunity to follow the girl. "Sir." The manager wanted to say something, but when he saw the youngster beside Chin Mo, his attitude changed instantly. "Young Master Joe, why are you here? Are you hurt anywhere?" Bojo shook her head, her dark eyes watching the direction the girl had left with a glint in her eyes. The nightclub manager didn't know what the youngster was thinking about. He turned to the staff. "Clean up the place and check the surveillance cameras." "What exactly happened?" "Yes." The nightclub manager was smart. He knew the youngster wouldn't knock into a pile of alcohol for no reason. Moreover, she had knocked into it with her back. Bojo knew that Jiang Zhua had hired a good person. She walked over with a devilish smile. "I'm sorry for the trouble, but there is indeed something. Since young Master Jiang is Brother Mo's friend, I'll remind you that someone has other business here. Manager Lee, it's time for you to investigate." In a nightclub, the other business was prostitution, pimping, and the most profitable drug. If it was the former, it could be dealt with slowly. But if it was the latter, young Master Jiang's identity was special. If someone found out that there was such a thing in his club, the entire Jiang family would be implicated. Manager Lee's expression changed, but he had to suppress it in front of the youngster. "What other business does young Master Joe mean?" Bojo stuffed a hand into her pocket and took a step forward. She opened her lips slightly, her voice calm, but it was as though a huge chunk of gold had drilled into Manager Lee's heart. "Fan." With just one word, Manager Lee could no longer maintain his composure. How did young Master Joe know about this?" Manager Lee was very anxious when he said this. Bojo could tell and briefly explained the process. Manager Lee really didn't know what to do. Bojo suggested, "Let's head to the surveillance room and check the footage of this girl. We have to report this to the police. If we don't, when they find out, your shop will become a den and you won't be able to clear your name. Also, Manager Lee, how many bathrooms do we have here?" "Bathroom?" Manager Lee didn't understand. "Young Master Joe, why are you asking this question?" Chapter 9:16. Manager Lee wanted to know how she knew the washroom wasn't within their surveillance. Why did he feel as though young Master Joe knew the structure of the nightclub better than him? "We don't have much time, get someone to call the police, we'll talk as we walk." Bojo walked towards the corridor at the side. Manager Lee. Who exactly was the manager of this nightclub? Manager Lee didn't have any experience in dealing with such matters since it was the Jiang family's business and no one dared to cause trouble here. Now that something like this had happened, it was extremely vexing. Manager Lee organized his thoughts. There are many washrooms and some private rooms have their own washrooms. If you include those, there should be more than 100 of them. Public washrooms, Bojo replied faintly. It isn't easy to find a buyer for such transactions in a high-class private room. Manager Lee. Since you know so much, I really thought you were the drug dealer, young Master Joe. Public washrooms. Bojo turned to the side, opening up a path. She repeated, indicating for Manager Lee to lead the way. Nightclubs usually didn't have high floors in order to maintain their high-class decorations. The best ones were 2 floors that looked like a palace, standing by the river with bright lights, looking like a place for the upper class. This was the main reason why the Jiang family didn't need to rely on other means to earn money. Such a nightclub wouldn't lack customers and the sales of red wine would be shocking. There were 2 floors and a total of 4 public washrooms. There were 2 at the top and 2 at the bottom. Every single one of them was very clean. Even some of the toilets were made of ancient wood. There were also some large wine boxes, all of which were placed inside. There was a lemon-scented air freshener in the air. It was very pleasant. Strangely, this was the only public washroom with such a smell. Manager Lee followed the youngster around but couldn't see anything. Until Bojo said, "Let's go to the one we saw just now." Manager Lee opened his mouth. "Young Master Joe, do you think we should wait for the police?" "There isn't a need." Bojo glanced at him. "Trust me, the drugs are in that washroom." The thick lemon-like smell is probably used to deal with sudden police raids. Unless it's a good police dog, it would be hard to detect other smells beneath the lemon-like smell. Manager Lee. So how did you find out about something that even the police couldn't find out? Bojo didn't look at Manager Lee's suspicious gaze. She smiled faintly and stepped into the bathroom. Without a moment's hesitation, he directly walked into each of the small partitions. What she saw was basically a seat with a sink in the back. When she lowered her eyes, her silver hair fell down and covered her expression, making her look especially handsome. Perhaps it had something to do with the youngster's movements. He casually stepped on the sink with one of his long legs and knocked on the sink lid with one hand. As his thin lips curled up, he directly lifted the sink lid. The entire process was as manly as flowing water. Manager Lee was dumbfounded by the sight. His disassembly skills were almost on par with professional toilets. Bojo pried them open because she wanted to see if there was anything inside. But it would take too much time for her to do it alone. The young man straightened his back and said, "Manager Lee, get your men to remove all the toilet and sink lids in this washroom. It'll be faster this way." Manager Lee really didn't know how to describe his current feelings. But having someone at the side to handle it was better than having no one since the police hadn't arrived yet. He ordered 4 to 5 people to enter the washroom. Bojo glanced at the corridor outside. "Manager Lee, can I trouble you to hang a cleaning sign outside the washroom? They were here to find clues and arrest someone. If they didn't close the door after creating such a huge commotion, they would be in trouble in the end." Manager Lee sincerely felt that young Master Joe's face didn't change at all when she commanded him. She was even better than their young Master Jiang. At this moment, it wasn't the time to be concerned about such things. Even though he wasn't sure how capable he was. But the youngster didn't seem like a clueless person. But thinking about it, it was strange. It wasn't as if Manager Lee didn't know the youngster in the past. Using the word prodigal to describe him was a compliment. But now, the youngster standing in front of him seemed to have been reborn. His action of kicking open the washroom door was swift. Moreover, when the youngster gave orders, his aura was irresistible. "Go and hang a sign." A smart person like Manager Lee would never judge someone based on their past impressions. Hence, after Bojo finished speaking, he immediately got his men to do it. He wanted to see if the youngster could find anything. The washroom's decor wasn't as luxurious and wasn't as small as other nightclubs. There were about 20 seats. The 4 of them lifted the cover of the sink, but they weren't as fast as the youngster. Manager Lee watched from the side, feeling conflicted. In the end, the youngster lowered his lids. His handsome face seemed to be smiling. He reached out with his other hand and gestured towards him. He didn't even turn his head, indicating for him to go over. As the person in charge of the biggest nightclub in Jiang City, Manager Lee, who was known as Boss Lee, had never done such a crude thing before. But after understanding the youngster's intentions, he couldn't not go over. There might be something. Helplessly, Manager Lee pulled out a handkerchief from the front pocket of his suit. He covered his nose and walked over. Bojo turned and saw Manager Lee's expression. Fortunately, she hadn't waited for the police. If they had come, the Almighty would have been the one investigating the case. If the Almighty had come to check the washroom, it would have been torturous given his misophobia. Hence, as the owner, she was too considerate. She had helped her pets solve the problem at the beginning. Manager Lee didn't understand why the youngster was smiling. He glanced down and frowned. What is this? A black plastic bag. Bojo arched a brow. Of course it's what we are looking for. Manager Lee, aren't you going to take it out? Take it from here. Manager Lee's gaze was filled with rejection. Bojo laughed. It's just a sink, it isn't dirty. Why, Manager Lee, do you intend to let a customer like me take it? Do you still remember that you are a customer? People who didn't know better would think that this nightclub was owned by your family. You even know the way to the sink. Manager Lee screamed in his heart. He wanted to chop his feet. How could he know that the previous time Bojo had been here, she had even climbed through the ceiling? Manager Lee had no choice since it wasn't a good thing for others to know. The fewer people who knew about it, the better it would be for their young master Jiang. He gritted his teeth and closed his eyes, scooping the bag out of the sink. He wanted to rush out and wash his hands. Bojo smiled faintly as she tore the black plastic bag open. 5 packets of white powdery substance fell out of the bag. Manager Lee froze on the spot. It was really drugs. And there was quite a lot of it. How could this be? The people who came here to play had their bags checked. If there was something like this, it would definitely be detained. It was one thing to hear the youngster talk about it, but it was another thing to see it. After all, Manager Lee was against drugs. He knew how scary it was. While Manager Lee was still lost in his thoughts, Bojo squatted down and picked up one of the packets. She weighed it and caressed it with her fingers. Her eyes dimmed. It's from the Golden Triangle. Manager Lee felt that the youngster's reaction wasn't the reaction a high school student should have after seeing drugs. But from the way she was searching, it didn't seem like something a high school student would know. Most importantly, how did young Master Joe know that these are from the Golden Triangle? If he didn't know young Master Joe's character, Manager Lee would have suspected that he had placed the things in the black plastic bag. But if he thought about it, young Master Joe probably liked to flaunt his wealth and chase after men. Even now, some images still flashed through his mind. But that didn't include him now. Bojo retracted her hand and straightened her body. This is good stuff, the purity is high, the particles are fine and the workmanship is exquisite. Who would dare to do this here? It must be from overseas. Bojo's last few words were too professional. Manager Lee's eyes lit up. He realized that this wasn't an ordinary drug case. Hand the things over to the police and explain the situation in detail. Bojo paused. She glanced over, her eyes glimmering. Oh right, I remember that we have to do a full check before entering. Ordinary things aren't allowed in, right? Manager Lee nodded. That was why he was confused. What exactly was going on? Was there a problem with the security? Just as he was thinking about it, the youngster asked again. The young man asked again, who's in charge of cleaning the bathroom? You have to ask the Human Resources Department. As a manager, he didn't know. Bojo smiled. If it's convenient, give me a list. All right. Manager Lee's mind wasn't on this anymore. When his phone lit up, he seemed to have regained his confidence. The police are here, I'll get them over now. Don't. Bojo reached out to stop him, a faint smile on her face. Let them go to your office. Some things aren't suitable to cause such a huge commotion. If we alert the enemy, we won't even be able to have a surprise. Surprise. Now, Manager Lee only felt terrified. Who on earth placed these things in the sink of the toilet bowl without anyone noticing? And it wasn't just one, there were 2 black plastic bags. That was a total of 10 packets. 10 packets. How many people would be addicted? The scariest thing was, he didn't know how many people had bought a portion of it before they discovered it. Manager Lee rubbed the space between his eyebrows. Why was Jiang City so unstable during this period of time? What should we do, young Master Zhou? We have to tell the police about this sooner or later. Bo Zhou's eyes dimmed. We can tell them, but don't let them come to this toilet. Just treat it as a routine check. I'll inform Brother Mo later and he'll settle the rest. It would be best if young Master Qin could help us. Manager Li heaved a sigh of relief. I still have to inform Boss Jiang about this. We can't hide such a huge problem from him. Bo Zhou wouldn't interfere. Up to you, it's better if others don't know. I understand, young Master Zhou. It won't be a good influence. Bo Zhou knew that it wasn't just a bad influence, there was a high possibility that someone had planted them here. The drug business was a profitable business. Many people were unscrupulous in order to earn this kind of money. Sometimes, the people who dealt with these things in the middle were the most inconspicuous ordinary people. They wouldn't even think about what was in the black plastic bags. In the past, Bo Zhou had been to a small town near the Golden Triangle in Yun City. There were many anti-narcotics policemen from the past. Countless anti-narcotics policemen died there in a year. They knew that it was the entrance to China. Once it was opened, the consequences would be unimaginable. Hence, they didn't hesitate to risk their lives. It was all for the sake of allowing the people living here to be happy and live a blessed life. It was a pity that some people didn't have this awareness. Especially in that kind of border area. No one could have imagined that the largest drug trading market at that time, and the way to transport drugs from overseas to within the country, was a vegetable market in that small town. On one side, they were honest vegetable sellers. On the other, they were transporters who transported drugs to various parts of the continent. They knew what they were doing. But in their hearts, it was fine as long as they didn't take the drugs. It was mainly because selling drugs was more profitable than doing anything else. Hence, these vegetable sellers became the perfect middleman for the drug traffickers. At that time, the police couldn't find any clues because no one would have thought that the ordinary vegetable seller was a drug transporter. What was more frightening was that the entire market was the same. Once a person's worldview was formed, it was really hard to change. We humans are often the ones who kill ourselves. The people in the market were like this. When the police went to investigate, they even felt that the police were interfering with their business. It wasn't like the narcotics officers had never encountered such a situation before. There were also some celebrities who took drugs. There would always be a group of people who would say, "Isn't it just taking drugs? We didn't harm anyone. Why are you pestering our dada? I really feel wronged for our dada, if this was enough to make him feel aggrieved. What about the anti-narcotics police who sacrificed their lives at the border to protect everyone?" Bo Zhou felt that some people weren't worth protecting. So she was different from the Almighty. Chapter 9:17. Even though they were doing the right thing, they weren't understood. On the other hand, the wrongdoers were easily forgiven. That was human nature. Bo Zhou had always known this. Because some people would easily forgive someone for someone else. The reason was simple, they weren't the ones who suffered the most. Perhaps that was the most heart-chilling part. The person they were protecting was the source of everything. Bo Zhou stood up. Without another word, she headed in the direction she had come from. After Manager Li kept the drugs, the first thing he did was to call Jiang Zhua. Jiang Zhua's car hadn't reached home yet. After hearing the entire story, his eyes dimmed. "Turn around and head back to Yisei." "Yes, young master." The driver didn't understand what had happened, but his young master's expression was worse than before. He started to feel uneasy. Jiang Zhua instructed Manager Li from afar. "Is young Master Qin still in the shop?" "Yes," Manager Li replied immediately. Boss Jiang, don't worry, young Master Jiao has already informed young Master Qin. Jiang Zhuo frowned. Young Master Zhou. That's right, we have to thank young Master Zhou. I never expected him to be so knowledgeable. If he hadn't noticed the abnormality of the person who bumped into him, we wouldn't have realized that there was such a business in the shop. What's more unbelievable is that he managed to find the drugs from the washroom in just 5 minutes. Young Master Jiang, you can't judge a person based on their past. They change too quickly, way too quickly. Manager Li wanted Jiang Zhuo to understand the entire situation. Mainly, he wanted to explain why young Master Zhou knew about the drugs. It was because young Master Zhou had been the one who had discovered the drugs and not him. Oh right, young Master Zhou was the one who suggested calling the police. He said it would be good for our shop. Jiang Zhuo's fingers stilled. He hadn't expected that the person who would solve the problem for his shop would be the young master of the Fu family. The night continued to fall. Qin Mo glanced down at the time on his phone. Wasn't a certain someone taking too long to get a dried fruit plate? At this thought, Qin Mo's eyes dimmed. Then he stood up, the warmth in his eyes no longer visible. Captain, where are you going? Lin Feng was obviously a little drunk. Qin Mo glanced at his blushing face before turning to look at Yun Hu, who was still pouring wine for Lin Feng. He understood what was going on and replied calmly, washroom. Why are all of you going to the bathroom? Lin Feng lowered his head and downed another glass of wine. Qin Mo basically didn't interfere with the relationships between team members, be it male or female. What he was thinking was, what did that guy go to do? With a certain someone's skills, even if something had happened, it wouldn't have taken so long. A whole 15 minutes. Could it be that it was the same as last time? He was on the run again. Qin Mo's left hand that was hanging by his side tightened. The curve of his chin was a little cold, so much so that there was an indescribable hostility in his back view. There were always all kinds of people in a nightclub, especially in the direction of the corridor. There was also a boy who seemed to be drunk. Otherwise, he wouldn't have dared to walk in front of Qin Mo. That person probably didn't have a normal sexual orientation. When he saw Qin Mo walking over, he couldn't move his eyes away. It was as though he wanted to get closer to Qin Mo. After all, men were usually more open than women. His intention to ask Qin Mo to sleep was obvious. But the youngster just lowered his voice and called out, handsome. Qin Mo opened his thin lips and said, scram. He respected everyone's sexual orientation. But it didn't mean that he respected the debauchery of this circle. He was instinctively disgusted by such shameless people. It was Qin Mo's fault for looking like a man and a woman. The boy didn't retreat. Instead, he took a step forward and teased even more. If you don't try, how do you know you won't like it? Qin Mo swept his gaze over. The boy thought that he had a chance. His hand was about to touch Qin Mo's chest. In the next second, he was kicked to the ground. Qin Mo didn't hold back in this kick. The boy held his knee and rolled back and forth in pain. Qin Mo didn't have any intention of stopping. When he looked up and saw the youngster who appeared at the corner, he stopped in his tracks. Both of them had never expected to meet in the middle of the corridor. Bo Jiao watched the scene. She was almost certain that the Almighty was born straight. But why was he so insistent on making him straight? But the original owner of this body must have pursued the Almighty in the same way. It was a miracle that he was able to live healthily until now. Qin Mo stuffed a hand into his pocket and walked towards her under the boy's gaze. The boy bit his lips. So you aren't a straight man. You already have a partner. Why are you acting so serious? Hey, ask your friend if he is willing to do it as a threesome. I don't have any objections. Bo Jiao found his words hilarious. Where did he get his confidence from? He thought that if he didn't have any objections, others would agree to his ridiculous suggestion. As expected, no matter where you were, there would always be people with a broken worldview. Bojo and Chin Mo had the same attitude towards such people. They would either ignore them or beat them up. It was obvious that they had more important matters to attend to today. Hence, Bojo didn't even glance at the boy. She turned to Chin Mo, "Brother Mo, there's a problem with darkness." Chin Mo saw the seriousness in the youngster's eyes and immediately realized it was a huge problem. "Let's talk while we walk." "Alright, but this isn't the direction. We have to go to Manager Lee's office." Bojo took a step forward. Chin Mo was on her left, and the two of them disappeared around the corner. The boy on the ground felt as though he had been slapped in the face. It was a harsh slap. Time trickled by slowly. After they met up, Bojo told Chin Mo everything that had happened. After she was done, she couldn't help but ask, "Did you want to beat me up when I chased you like this in the past?" Unexpectedly, Chin Mo thought about it seriously. "You should be glad that you haven't been as close to me as he is now." Which meant, it was within your tolerance range. No. Chin Mo was thinking about his attitude back then. "But I didn't want to bother." Bojo arched a brow. "That's not much better." "Indeed, I didn't like you at the start." Chin Mo glanced at her. "Until you changed your method to attract my attention. You refused to add me as a friend in the game. It wasn't a bad method to advance by taking a step back." Bojo opened her mouth. She wanted to say that the Almighty had misunderstood. At that time, she had been purely rejecting him. But before she could speak, Chin Mo spoke again, his gaze deep. Chin Mo opened his mouth again, his gaze deep. "Or did I misunderstand? Did you want to reject me from the start? That's weird. You were insisting on wanting me the day before and the next day, you didn't even seem to recognize me. Do you think that's normal?" It wasn't normal. Hence, Bojo could only swallow her words. She admitted his words. "I was indeed taking a step back to advance." Chin Mo chuckled at the youngster's depressed expression. "Do you like me that much? Do you like me so much that you would resort to such underhanded methods?" "Yes." What else could she do? Say no. Then the Almighty would notice something amiss and discover her biggest secret? She was starting to suspect that the Almighty had said it on purpose. "Since you like me so much," Chin Mo paused, looking at the youngster. "Why didn't you agree to be with me?" Bojo paused. Every single one of his questions was a trap. The Almighty was the only one who could do such a thing. Bojo had to find an excuse. "I'm still a boy, I have to be careful." Chin Mo watched the youngster, his gaze deepening. "Then I'll wait for you to regain your true identity." Bojo didn't know how to respond. She hoped that the Almighty would treat her the same way he treated her after he found out who she was. On the other end, Manager Lee couldn't help greeting Chin Mo when he saw him. "Young Master Chin." The police had arrived as well. After finding out about the drugs, they had planned to take action immediately. Fortunately, Chin Mo had arrived in time. He had called Director Huang since most people didn't know Chin Mo's identity. Without Director Huang's call, the police wouldn't have been mobilized. Director Huang knew Chin Mo well. If there wasn't a case, he wouldn't have contacted him. Unless there was a case. Hence, the moment he hung up, Director Huang rushed over. By then, Chin Mo and the others were already in the surveillance room. With the youngster as a witness, they had successfully locked onto the drug addict who had bumped into him. "I have to report this case to the higher-ups and apply for a higher level of authority." Director Huang's voice was deep. Since the drugs were being spread in such a manner, it wasn't just a simple business. It was a large-scale organized drug trafficking. They had even processed the smell, which proved that their opponent wasn't easy to deal with. In the end, how did the drugs get in? How did they contact the buyer? Who was the one who avoided the surveillance at night and hid the drugs in the bathroom? Besides, it was rare to see such a drug trafficking method. There had to be something fishy going on. Director Huang hadn't experienced such a thing in years. Ever since Qin Mo had dealt with that bunch of people, drugs hadn't appeared in Jiang City again. Why did he sense a dangerous aura that signaled the arrival of a storm? Qin Mo was still watching the surveillance when he caught sight of the youngster lifting the lid of the sink. He glanced over, glancing at her. How did a rich young master know that it was easy to hide drugs in such a place? Bo Jiao seemed to have noticed his gaze. She tilted her head and caught a flash of suspicion in his eyes. At the same time, she realized that her actions weren't appropriate in front of the camera. It could even be said that her actions were filled with loopholes. But even so, Bo Jiao was still able to pull it off. She lifted her thin lips and her eyes curved into crescent moons. When the girl bumped into me just now, she kept talking about the washroom. I found it strange, but fortunately, we went to the washroom to take a look. Manager Lee. That wasn't a look, it was a walk in the park. She was even more familiar with such matters than the police. But there wasn't a need to say such things in such a setting. Bo Jiao glanced up at Qin Mo. She wasn't sure if the Almighty would believe her. Even if he didn't, there was nothing she could do. The more she interacted, the harder it was to hide. Bo Jiao was mentally prepared for this. What should we do now? Manager Lee asked. Qin Mo retracted his arm from the control panel, his voice calm. Put the things you found back in their original positions and pretend you don't know anything. Manager Lee was confused. What was young Master Qin going to do? Leave a few plainclothes policemen to patrol the toilet 24/7. Within a day, arrest all the people who take the goods from here. Qin Mo tapped his fingers and asked the same question. How many cleaners are in charge of the bathroom? After hearing this, Manager Lee subconsciously turned to the youngster. At this moment, Bo Jiao understood the Almighty's entire plan. They would continue to place the bait. Not only would they not alert the enemy, but they would also think that it was safe and walk right into the trap. As for why they were asking about the cleaners in the bathroom, the reason was simple. Other than the staff of the nightclub, everyone had to go through a security check before entering the nightclub. Hence, they could basically confirm that someone from the inside had brought the drugs in. In terms of quantity, carrying so many drugs to work would be a psychological burden for anyone. No one would be afraid of being discovered when doing such a thing. If they were discovered, it would be a crime. Hence, they wouldn't do it. There was only one type of person who could easily bring such a large amount of drugs into the bathroom, and that was the bathroom cleaner. Usually, the cleaners of large entertainment venues would push a trolley with a medium-sized trash can to do the first thing in the morning. It was a natural tool for transporting drugs. No one would notice what was inside. Besides, only the cleaners wouldn't be noticed when they were cleaning the bathroom. Besides, they would be able to check if there was anything wrong with the goods during their shifts. This meant that the person transporting the drugs was definitely one of the cleaners. Bo Jiao wasn't sure how the girl knew the drugs were in the bathroom. She must have seen it while following the drug trafficker. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.